moment to upload or to start. All right, pull this back up. All right, everybody, thanks for tuning in. This is Nick at Junkie Base Studios. I have Marky Ray, very special guest, with me today. For those who don't know, he's been the tour manager for some of the largest bands some of you can ever think of. He's done roadie work. He has been a touring guitarist. Uh, Worked for Jim Rose Circus. The list for you goes on and on. Everybody, I want to introduce you to Marky Ray, and we're going to talk shop and discuss different stuff in the music world today. So thank you for your time. I greatly appreciate it.
Oh, thanks, Nick. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Not a problem. So we were just discussing. You came from a very musical family.
Yeah,
So, and oh, it's giving us a low bandwidth thing again. We'll be good. But I mean, honest to goodness, that was, correct me if I'm wrong, that was a very fortunate thing for you because a lot of us musicians did not grow up with parents that were musical and musically inclined and did a lot of stuff like that.
yeah. I was really lucky. But my parents were both musicians and artists and educators, and I was very fortunate to grow up in a house with lots of, deep influences. My parents liked the blues. My parents liked the Beatles. They liked jazz. I grew up on Dixieland. My father, Louis Armstrong, still brings me to tears. Fats Waller, Jelly Roll Morton, uh, Tom Lear. If you're not hip to Tom Lear, look him up.
I
Um,
know the name, but I'm
musical,
drawing a blank
musical.
right now.
He was a musical satirist back in the 1950s. He actually put out his own records back in the day. Fascinating guy, still with us. He was a mathematician at MIT and wrote some amazing songs. For those of you in the know, look up The Elements on YouTube. Tom Lear. That's the kind of education I was graced with my parents. My father was a jazz pianist. My mother was a flautist, and my mother sang, had a beautiful voice. I probably inherited that from her. My father didn't sing, so I'm assuming I got it from my mom. But no, I was very lucky, and there was always instruments around. We had auto harps, zithers, if you will. There was always percussion, different things around, stringed instruments, guitar, violin. I was the only child who wasn't subjected to piano lessons, so I probably would have appreciated it, but I'd probably be playing a different instrument now, which is I'm playing guitar mostly now, guitar and bass, which I have for quite a number of years. But and that was because of my older brothers we were talking about before. My older brother John has played instruments for many years, and he continues to play now. He's playing in a lot of bluegrass, and he likes that. He likes a lot of indigenous music of the Appalachians, if you will.
Yeah.
He likes a lot of that kind of stuff, and more power to him. I mean, I like it too. We both kind of grew up on that boarding school I was telling you about. Was a sort of a weird amalgamation of just different people and styles. People from all over the world came in there, and we were exposed to just every kind of imaginable musical. I mean, at the time I was going to this boarding school, it was the late '70s, so punk rock was happening. But I was exposed to dance, like Serbian dance records. They had local dance troops that would come in, and
Wow.
then there'd be these bluegrass bands that would come in and play. And the drummer would be barefoot playing practically a stand-up snare. It's crazy. But upright basses and mandolins and that kind of stuff run throughout the school, old dobros and things like that.
Jeez.
So I was exposed to that kind of music, along with some bluegrass and Appalachian music, along with religious liturgical kind of music, as well as rock and roll and punk rock and everything along with it. So I had quite an upbringing in the olden days, back in the before times, as we like to say.
You know what? That's what my 5-year-old says about when I was born. I was born in the before days and old. So that one
Well,
makes me-
especially with this COVID shit, it's all going to be, people will be asking us when we're really old and grizzled. I mean, I feel that way now, but it'll be like, what was it like in the before times? And it'll be like, well, son, I have to tell you.
We actually went out and did stuff and didn't wear masks.
Exactly.
Now, I mean, you used to play, and you still do, a lot of rockabilly.
Yes.
That is making a big resurgence. I know years ago it
Oh, I
started
love it.
making a comeback somewhat with Volbeat was right on the border line of that, but you have more truly coming back out. I mean, what's your
Oh, I love
thought on about these, like the industrial, as you say, industrial strength jazz? That's making a comeback.
Oh,
I mean,
I love it. I'm thrilled with it. I mean, I was lucky because when I was in high school, my junior and senior year at this crazy ass boarding school, and the reason I'm not giving you the name and all that is just liability. I don't want to be. I don't need to get sued for any of this shit. So just leaving that dark. You guys can imagine where it is. Anyways, when I was there, some of the most important stuff that came out during that time was there was an initial resurgence of bands, like the Stray Cats, and for as much shit as they got back in the day, they were really great, and they made it. They were a New York, an upstate New York band that went to England and made it big as a trio, and so the Stray Cats kind of were the resurgence, but they kind of got me interested. And there was another band called the Polecats from England, and rockabilly was happening here. There was a band in Kent, Ohio, that I ended up joining in about 1982 called Johnny Clampett and the Walkers. And they had seen me play. I used to have a band called Johnny Action that had played the summer before with that band, the F Models, the one I'm working on the tribute record for now. We had opened for the F Models, and this guy Johnny from the band, Johnny Clampett, came down and saw me with his bass player, bandmate Bob, and we're still lifelong friends. They came and saw that show, and they were like, "Hey, we've got this band, Johnny Clampett and the Walkers. We just lost our singer. You want to sing with us?" So they came over to my house. We set up and played. I auditioned for them, and they liked me, and I ended up singing a number of songs with them during the set. We kind of split it sometimes. Johnny would sing some, I would sing some. But Bob, the bassist, who's still one of my dearest friends, Bob would go up to New York. He was good friends with the waitresses. He used to date Patty from the Waitresses, rest her soul. And he used to go up and visit her up in New York for extended periods of time. And I used to play a bass for the band when Bob would go on these extended forays. So that was another thing. So I started playing upright bass with them. I mean, I was in high school. I was still playing upright, or starting to play upright. But when I got out of high school, it was like I went whole hog into the rockabilly thing after the Johnny Action band had been sort of punk rock, sort of new wavy. Went and played rockabilly with Johnny Clampett and the Walkers. And the funny thing that happened about that is I played with them for close to a year. And then one day Johnny came in, and they'd been a trio. I joined them. I was the fourth member. And Johnny was like, "Well, Marky, I'm going to let you go because, like, you're too serious. You're too driven. And, I gave me some excuse like that. And I was like, truth be told, I think he wanted to make more money as a trio, and I'm okay with that. I've gone on to other things. So Johnny and I are still friends. It's all good. At the time when you leave your first leaving of a band, it's really like, oh, I don't love you anymore.
Yeah, there's bad
but you're
blood
over
for
it.
a while and everything. Yeah.
Well, it's funny, because we're all still friends, and believe it or not, they're called the Walking Clampets now. And they before COVID, in the before times, they were doing an annual show here, and I'd still go out and sing with them and stuff. So that was because they all live in different parts of the country now. So they'd come back to Ohio and do a Thanksgiving, a post-Thanksgiving show, and that was an annual event up until COVID. So hopefully we'll get back to that at some point. But we're all still dear friends. But it's funny because right after that, where I left the Clampets, I moved back to Cleveland. After I'd been living there, moved back to my parents' house after high school, and then played in that band in Kent, Johnny Clampett. I moved back to Cleveland, and that's when a lot of the roadie stuff. This is like early '83 or so, and a lot of that stuff started to happen with the roadie thing. I started doing more shows, started working for more bands, but still playing and looking for gigs, looking for bands to play with. And there was a band from Kent that I'd known for years and years. And it turned out that when I moved back to Cleveland, my best friend Gordon had come back from California. He moved out there initially after we had our first apartment in high school. He came back, and we moved in with my brother into an apartment in Cleveland Heights. And the Human Switchboard were my neighbors. And I'd known them since I was 12 years old. I'd been buying records from them in Kent, Ohio, 12 miles from here. And their band, the Human Switchboard, was like really blowing up on the East Coast. And this is when, keep in mind, pre-internet, you know, but they were getting these huge write-ups in New York Rocker and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So we'd go up and play. We did an East Coast tour. We went up and played in Boston and Connecticut, I think, and maybe I know we played in New York a couple of times, and maybe Hoboken as well. That's a blur, but that was really cool because I got to do all, you know, keyboard setup, drum setup, Bob's guitar and amp, restringing, lugging, loading. I did not drive on that tour. They had their own van, and I fortunately didn't have to drive on that tour. But I got back from that, and just as I'd gotten back, I missed, like, believe it or not, REM and the Replacements at Peabody's in Cleveland. I think it actually might still have been the Pirates Club. Anyways, I digress. So there was a big hubbub about music at that point. I mean, really, it was, that's when the tours really came through. I mean, there was other tours before that, but like in '83 was just a banner year. You had REM, you had the Replacements on the road, Husker Du, Minutemen, all the SST bands, you know, Saccharine Trust, you know, the Circle Jerks were out, and Frontier. You had, I mean, every great punk record from that time, you know, you name it, the band was on the road. Iggy Pop, all the bands, all the great bands you could ever imagine. And this was pre-Eurythmics, Culture Club, mid-'80s kind of second or third British invasion, if you will, which was all good. I'm not knocking that stuff. I mean, that's really the sound of what became the '80s, you know, in a lot of respects. But on the local scene here around that time, that's where things started to really pick up. There was a lot of bands doing great stuff. There's always been a lot of great local Cleveland bands: Wild Giraffes, Perubu, the Pagans, the Clocks, and all these bands were happening. Another great band that never sadly made national prominence, but was a very important local band, was the Easter Monkeys. And the Easter Monkeys is Jim Jones, Charlie Ditto, Linda Hudson, and Mr. Chris. And Jim Jones had been in Perubu. He'd been their sound person. He'd been their guitarist. And Jim was kind of like everybody's go-to guru in the scene. He knew records in and out. He was very supportive of us younger people, kind of took us under his wing, and was just very generous with his time and his knowledge. And so we were really lucky to be immersed in this sort of scene. And I say we because I'm not alone. I mean, everyone around me who's like Sean, who's still around, that's what we did. We had to network. We were forced to go out and push ourselves. And that's how you met people. You didn't, you know, we didn't have cell phones. We didn't have the internet. No, you actually went and you physically met people. Mm-hmm. You wrote down their number on the back of a bar napkin or a matchbook or whatever you could get your grubby mitts on, beer label, bottle cap, whatever. And of course, there were parties everywhere too, because there'd be a show, and then, you know, the Black Flag's in town. Oh, they're at so-and-so's house. So people go over there for a party. Or, you know, the Minutemen stayed at my house one night after they played with Love Tractor, because they didn't have a place to play, and they put them on first. I thought they were supposed to headline. I went down to see them, and they'd already played. And they're loading out. I'm like, I'd met them before, and I was like, Mike, George, what's up? You know, and they're like, oh, we had to play first and whatever. And I'm just like, here, come stay at our house. So they came and stayed at our house, slept on my floor. The Minutemen slept on my floor. I got to hang out with D. Boone and walk him down the street to get ear medicine because he had an ear infection at the time. And he was a big fella, but he carried himself like like a ballerina. He had such grace, and I was so in awe of the guy. You know, I barely talked, but he was so nice and jovial, and of course we were just crushed when he died, because D was just, you know, just a lovely guy, and you know, they were a huge influence on me personally too. So, but you know, that's just some of the crazy shit that happened around that time. So I'm sorry, I know I'm going on quite a bit here.
Oh no, you know, I enjoy this. That's why it's not okay when I have people on here. It's, you know what, we keep it casual. It's not like that. Sure. You have a wealth of knowledge, a wealth of experience, I mean, you've roadied and done tour managed and played with people. The list will blow your mind if you guys go look up Marky Ray.
Well,
It is insane.
I'll carry on a bit. So this is sort of an evolved pattern of what I became over the course of the 80s. So, we're talking 83, 84. Around in December of 83, I'd finished my tenure of being the guitarist in learning for the Terrible Parade. I made my debut with the Terrible Parade December 18th, 83. And I was still 18 at the time. I turned 19 the next month in January in 83. I did another tour with the Kingpins around that time. And as I said, I did the Switchboard. Actually, this would have been 83 and 84, I believe. Oh, fuck. It's all a blur. Anyways, so I went from working for bands to joining that band, the Terrible Parade. And I played in the Terrible Parade from 83 until 1988. But during that time, there was a studio starting out in Willoughby, Ohio, called Beat Farm Studios, and it was a friend of ours, Chris Burgess, from this record. He worked at Record Revolution. He was a computer programmer, still is a computer programmer, and he was very interested in starting a recording studio with his partner Alan McGinty, who was in the Wild Giraffes. So they did, and we were one of the first bands. We were the first band to record there, and we used two TAC or Tascam 4 tracks. I think there were Tascams, and we linked them together, which gives you like 6 tracks.
Yeah.
So you can make drums down and everything. And we made our flexi disc. Terrible Parade made a flexi disc that you could mail to various promoters, and we used that. And even our flexi disc. Now, this is for people over the age of 45 or 50 might remember that there was college radio magazines like the Gavin Report and Rock Pool back in the 1980s. The Gavin Report gave you all the regional radio, college radio charts. You could see where your record charted. So even our flexi disc charted in different cities like Boston and New York and things like that. And we got a Rock Pool pick for our EP that came out in 1985. It's just called The Terrible Parade. It's a 4-song EP. And then so we toured behind that. The Terrible Parade did some gigs in 1985. We played Connecticut. We played Boston. We played New York. That kind of stuff. And it was just really a great experience. We helped pave the road for a lot of the indie bands that came before us and the ones that came after us, because that really was the land of couch surfing. Figuring out how you get from point A to point B. But the nice thing is about that time frame. You'd go play CBGB's, which was like kind of the pinnacle of where you wanted to be, because that was like the coolest place. It was the most infamous place, and you felt like you'd made it once you played CB's. So Terrible Parade went up and got a gig there, and this was not an easy feat. I mean, you had to send Hilly. First of all, you had to connect with Hilly Crystal, and then you'd have to send him a cassette. 3-song cassette with a bio and a picture, all typed and all shit, and a black and white photo. And you send it to him, and it would sit in a pile for 6 months or so. And you'd call him and go, "Hey, Helly, did you get to that?" And he'd be like, "No, call me back in 6 weeks." And you call him back in 6 weeks, and maybe he got you or not. And then he'd be like, "Yeah, come out, Thursday for a 3 a.m. gig." And we'd drive up and do a showcase. It wasn't that late, but somewhere around 12 or 1 in the morning, we'd play at CBGB's, and that was the world's, that was the be all and end all. We played CBGB's, and I ended up doing that with Death on a Stick. I ended up doing that with Death of Samantha when I was in them. So it was just crazy. So that was kind of how we started getting our feet wet. We'd record more at Beat Farm, and right after we recorded at Beat Farm, everybody followed suit. Now Cleveland, in proper where we were living, there's the west side, there's the east side and the west side, and they're both sort of different animals. The east side is sort of artistic and arty and intellectual. The west side is kind of like more hard rock, heavy metal kind of. And I'm talking about the scenes, not necessarily the people.
Yeah,
it's more just kind of like where those bands came from. We were more the arty kind of scene, along the Perubu kind of lines. And we were more like the WREW and some of the metal and hard rock and different punk bands, hardcore bands were more West Side, WCSB, which was Cleveland States Radio, which ironically I went there. But so yeah, I'm playing in the Terrible Parade. I'm doing these various things, and I'm going to Cleveland State circa 83 to 88 when I graduated, whatever. And then Death on a Stick came along in about 1985. And keep in mind, this whole time I'd been going to shows, working for bands. Around this time, too, I started working for Belkin Productions, which is now Live Nation. So I was working at, things like the Richfield Coliseum, working for Guns N' Roses on their first tour. I was also working at Warner Brothers. I was working at WIA as a guy in the mailroom, which was called promotions. So I took every odd music job you could. And I did all these things. I learned how they did this, I learned how they made records, I learned how they promoted records, learned how record companies work, learned how promoters work, how shows work, how running at shows work. So I was doing all this stuff at the same time. It all sort of snowballed. So I was doing the Terrible Parade, Death on a Stick all through college. And right around night, and keep in mind, working for bands this whole time, working at the Agora, working at the Fantasy. I mean, we did early Jane's Addiction shows. We did the early, you name it. At some point, we worked from everybody from Oingo Boingo to Reformed Buzzcocks in the late 80s, Jane's Addiction, like I said. Pixies didn't come around till much later in the early 90s in terms of U.S. touring. But all those bands we would see or work for, and along with all the hair metal bands and everything that came later, as well as all the new wave English acts. We'd see a lot of those kind of people. So that whole time, it was all snowballing. Around 1988 or so, I left the Terrible Parade just because we were kind of spinning our wheels. We determined that we should have been releasing music the whole time. But as you know, CDs had just kind of come to the fore, and they were very, very expensive. It was kind of odd, and you couldn't do CDs back then. So it was either press vinyl, which vinyl was kind of like, we weren't really sure where vinyl was going. It was also very expensive. And so we sadly didn't release anything. In 1990, a Terrible Parade compilation called, this wonderful guy, Chris Porter at Presto Records, put it out. And they reissued it actually last fall, which was wonderful. It was very nice of them to put that out again. But it was called Where Were You When the Lights Went Out? And that was a compilation that Alan, the lead singer, put together after I left the band. There's a couple other cuts on there, but it's all for the most part, it's our four-piece lineup of the classic Terrible Parade lineup. Anyway, so I left the Terrible Parade in May of 88, and I ended up finishing college in the summer of 88, and Death on a Stick was still playing at that time. And 2 weeks after I got out of college, I got a call from a friend of mine, that friend from the Kingpins, and he's like, "Hey, the Lyres from Boston," that's Lyres, like the lyre, like the old ancient instrument. Mm-hmm. The Lyres are looking for a bass player. And I was like, okay. So I called up Jeff Conley, the lead singer of the Lyres, and they hired me sight unseen over the phone. So I went up and I auditioned for them. We did 3 rehearsals and then played in front of 2,000 people at the Channel in Boston. And I was the bass player on the Promises Promise tour all around the U.S. and Canada. And that was my first proper U.S. Canadian tour. We did like 60 dates or more in 4 months, literally, and I hate to use that word all the damn time, but literally going from Boston to Portland, Maine, to Montreal, to Toronto, Ottawa, Guelph, all the way across Canada to Vancouver, down all the way to San Diego, all the way across the southern United States to Florida, and up the East Coast over 4 months, and it was just absolutely insane. Read the Lyres stories in my book, Rock and Roll Mercenary, which is on Kindle, kids. Gotta keep that 12 cents in royalties coming. That book. Yeah,
oh yeah.
Anyway, it's but yeah, there's some really great Lyres stories from that tour. So I did that tour, and then the band broke up in like December 3rd of 1988. I played my last show with the Lyres, and I moved back to Cleveland and started over again. And I went right from that. There was a sort of a 60s band in Cleveland called the New Salem Witch Hunters, still around, play occasionally. And their bass player had just left, and they invited me to join them. And this was around 1989 by this point. So I joined this band, the New Salem Witch Hunters, and played with them for the better part of 2 years. And during that time, I was also working for Jerry Shirley's version of Humble Pie. Jerry was the drummer in Humble Pie, and he lived in Cleveland. He was a disc jockey, and he had a band, his version of Humble Pie. Steve Marriott was still alive, but had really nothing to do with the band at that point. He tragically died less than a year later. But it was Wally Stalker from the Babies, Charlie Hune from Ted Nugent's Weekend Warriors was doing the Steve Marriott vocals and guitar parts, and Anthony Jones, the late great Anthony Jones, who was in the Planets, a great punk band in New York City, and later was the second bass player who replaced Greg Ridley in Humble Pie, and he was a trip, man. We had some wild times together. So, you know, the end of the decade rolls around. It's 1990, 91. It's 1990. In 1990, I left the New Salem Witch Hunters and this band, Death of Samantha, famous Homestead Records band, who I went to school with. I've known Doug Gillard and John Petkovic and Steve O and David James, the bass player at the time, the first bass player. I went to Cleveland State with those cats. And so I'd known them forever. And with Death of Samantha, used to play with the Terrible Parade all the time. So we were all friends. So they had broken up and then reformed. And then John, the singer, asked me to become the guitarist. And then Doug Gillard rejoined the band and I moved over to bass. And we made an amazing record that is shelved and never seen the light of day. And that was produced by Sean Bevan of Nine Inch Nails. And which is another tale unto itself, but for another time. I don't want to. Other people shall remain nameless. I don't want to get into the acrimony about this shelved record, but needless to say, I hope it sees the light of day before I leave this mortal coil, because I'm very proud of it. It was really a great record. But as the timelines begin to blur, reaching back into the Marky Ray memory machine, so I go from New Salem Witch Hunters, I worked with Humble Pie up until the very end. They broke up in around 1991. So 1990, in March of 1990, a friend of mine had become the tour manager for Nine Inch Nails. And this was a guy who had started in the industry myself. He used to work for the Terrible Parade, and he'd become Nine Inch Nails tour manager after they'd done Peter Murphy, and they'd been out with Skinny Puppy back in 1988 and had sort of a disastrous opening tour. So Trent reformed the band on Nine Inch Nails with Chris Vrenna, his drummer, and David Hames, I think and there was another guy, and Richard Patrick was in the group at the time. But I didn't do those early tours. I got hired on right after they finished the Peter Murphy and the Jesus Mary Chain tour. I hopped on board, and the first thing I did for Nine Inch Nails was drive them to Chicago. My friend went out of town. He had some business to do. So I tour managed the group and took them to Chicago for the Head Like a Hole video. And we ended up we went to the Ohio Motel, spent the night, got up the next day, drove to Martin Atkins' loft, picked up Martin Atkins, put all his gear in the van, drove it down to the Exit Lounge in Chicago, set up all the band gear underneath this sort of like Thunderdome looking thingy. Trent had an actual mix, a 1-inch mixtape, and a real Nine Inch Nails tape mix, and 1-inch reel, not real expensive now. Anyways, he took this mix he didn't like, and he took the tape and strewn it all over the place. And they tied up flowers, and, dead flowers and stuff, and had accoutrements sort of over this thing. It was basically a rebar shell over this dance floor where the band was playing, and they would film them in different points of view, going around that and above and below. And in that video, Trent is like writhing around. They had rope around his ankles, and they'd pull him up from his ankles, and he'd be writhing around, and they'd shoot him from underneath it, a point of view. So I would help lift him back down and get him set back up for the next take. And I ran the smoke machine and helped clean up after every take. So that was the first thing I did for Nine Inch Nails, was the Head Like a Hole video, which came to kind of be my calling card, which is really funny as I went on to work for the band. I was their first technician, their first production manager, and their sole technician for 1990 through 91 mostly. I mean, we had other people at one point, but I was the only guitar tech throughout all of Lollapalooza in Europe, except for the last few. Trent finally hired his own guitar tech after we played Wembley, and I was actually happy because we'd been through a lot at that point, because it's very hard as a guitar technician, it's very hard to work for a number of people, especially when they're smashing gear like shit through a goose. So I ended up kind of dealing with a lot of that. But all that said, Trent and I are still friends. I just haven't seen him in years. But we really had some insane, crazy times on those particular tours. But so what happened was, right after the Head Like a Hole video, we went right out on the road with Meat Beat Manifesto on a summer tour, and we were doing clubs. Insane shows. We had some absolutely insane shows. The first tour we did was a West Coast swing, and we drove from Cleveland to San Francisco in 44 hours straight. and in a 14-foot box truck. Is me, Marco, the tour manager, and Bob Henning, our lighting designer. And that was just absolutely nuts. And we went from, so we did and it was a dartboard tour, if you're familiar with it. I'm telling you, you're here, you're here.
Yeah.
So we were we did Palo Alto, we did San Francisco, we did LA, San Diego, and then Vancouver and Seattle, and drove home. And it was absolutely the most ball buster tour, and it was insane. We played this club in LA called Helter Skelter, which was also known as the Club with No Name. And we pulled up there, and all of a sudden the Black Flag van pulls up with the 4 bars on the back, and it's a big box truck. And we're like, wow, what the hell? And who should hop out but Dave Levine, or Dave Ratt, and Brian Ratt, and their girlfriend, and Dave's girlfriend, Carrie Keyes, who's now the monitor engineer and has been the monitor engineer for Eddie Vedder and Pearl Jam for the better part of 30 years now. But so Dave from Black Flag and Brian Ratt and Carrie were they brought in the PA for that show. So I became fast friends with them in 1990, and we're still all good friends today. So they ran the sound and for that show, and it was like, this place was like an emptied out grocery store with a stage, and I mean, there was like a foot off the ground. So the crowd at the end of the show, I was up against the drum riser with people stacked up in front of me like cordwood, reaching for the band. I'm standing on Trent's microphone stand. I'm a huge guy, standing on it, shrunk down so he can sing and finish the set, and I'm his sole barricade, up against the drum riser, and people are stacked up to my chest, like pawing at them. It was absolute bedlam. I mean, I was threatening people with an inch of their life to get the fuck off my stage. So it was just, and the whole tour was like that. And for those of us who lived through the 80s and hair metal, it was like the coming out of the tribes. There was all these, what I call the black clad masses, the tattooed, pierced, branded, scarification, brightly colored or darkly colored clothes, and you're like, where the hell have you people been? And where did you come from? And that's what it became, this overground movement of like alternative music. So we go through 1990, and 9 Inch Nails is primarily my focus then. Though I was still doing shows with Death and Samantha in the downtime. I would go up. We do shows at CBGB's. We actually opened for the Afghan Wigs the night they got signed to Elektra, and they got signed to Elektra, and we got signed to History. And during that time with the Nails, we did the Meat Beat Manifesto, did some more shows with Die Warsaw. Earlier in the summer of 1990, we had gone and played at the New Music Seminar in New York City, and Die Warsaw had been on that bill, and we became fast friends with them. So come around December of 1990, we started a tour, and it was started in the Fantasy Theater, big, 1,200 capacity, or it might be 1,800 capacity venue. It was like an old movie theater with a stage in it. That's where everybody played back in the day. And 9 Inch Nails tour started there, and Die Warsaw was our opening act for that tour, and it was wonderful. And we went out, and that was the tour that Trent said, he asked me and Fritz, our monitor engineer, he's like, I want you guys to play guitar and head like a hole, because to give it more power. And the funny thing is they built this staging out of key clamps and conduit. So it was like heavy piping across the amplifiers, across everything. And there was a cage over the drummer with cyclone fencing on and a roof on it. And I would climb up there if the venue was tall enough, and I would stand up there and play guitar like a go-go dancer. I'd head like a hole, and Trent loved it. He used to look up at me, and I'd be like, right on. I'd be up there playing guitar. There's footage of me playing at the Astoria in London on the last show of that tour. You can see me up at the top playing guitar. It's really funny. Somebody posted that on YouTube a while back, but that's what I did for the better part of 90 into 91. Now, when 91 rolled around in the spring, we went out and this was still on that tour with Die Warsaw. We finished the tour with Die Warsaw, and then we flew out to LA to play 4 gigs with Jane's Addiction. Actually, we played 2 gigs with Jane's Addiction. We opened the Universal Amphitheater show and closed the amphitheater show. So we did 2 dates with Jane's Addiction, and then we did another Midwest swing in between that, or a West Coast swing, and did some other dates around that. And then we came back, and then I remember Trent called me in the spring, and he's like, we're going to do this tour. It's called Lollapalooza, and it's going to be Jane's Addiction. It'll be amazing. And we're going to have, 45-minute set. And, and I'm thinking, oh man, it's going to be amazing. And sure enough, we went out on it, and it was brutal. I mean, it was fun. It was fun as hell, but it was brutal because we were, at the time, Trent was trying to get off TBT Records. He was having some issues with, having major issues with the record label. And they were kind of fighting that financially because they were fighting to get off the label. They had lawyers involved. They didn't have a lot of money for production. Well, you couldn't really do a lot of live production on Lollapalooza other than with the band had they were glow in the dark paint, fluorescent paint. They had fluorescent lights on stage, and we had a cold fogger that always got blown out. We tried to have fog on the stage to make it scary, but it was windy in every venue, so the fog would just blow off, and it was kind of as Jeff Pincus of the Butthole Surfers described it, as a barbecue out of control is what it looked like to him. But that was still an incredible time. But the problem was Trent was just smashing guitars like shit through a goose. And it's funny because I was just on Facebook the other day, and somebody posted on this Wax Tracks record label thing. They're saying how, I saw 9 Inch Nails once in 1993, and their guitars and keyboards are fake. It's all fake, blah, blah, blah. And I'm thinking, they didn't even tour or do any shows in 1993, and those are all real guitars and keyboards. Trust me. I know, because I still have some of the broken ones, and I know for, none of those keyboards were all DX7s. They were vintage fucking keyboards, and they cost a fortune now. And on the Downward Spiral tour, which I was out with 9 Inch Nails, but I was with the Jim Rose Circus, and we were opening on that tour. Trent employed an old friend of mine from the Cincinnati band called the Erector Set. His name was Barry Haney, and all Barry's job on that entire tour was to fix DX7s and put them out on stage. He had to have 5 working DX7s over the course of a show, and they had them on stage, and they used them as triggers, but they also used the sounds that were in the keyboard as well. So, anyways, it's just more 9 Inch Nails trivia that I see people write about, and it just bugs me. It's like, you have no idea. You weren't even fucking there, It's like so many people think they know these things. It's like, oh, I know it. Like, oh, fuck you, man. You were there, So anyways, we go out on the Lollapalooza tour, and I think I told you about, I don't want to get into all the we had some warm-up dates, and I got dragged off a stage and injured on one of the first shows. And, had a blow-up with this audience member. I nearly killed the fucker for dragging me off the stage, and and that just precipitated a lot of, it was like bad things happen in threes, and that was one of them. So I got dragged off the stage, injured my shoulder, and that was the reason I got dragged off is this guy, he grabbed my laminate. I never wear laminates around my neck anymore because I was clearing the stage divers, like this dude. He dove off the stage and took me with him, and I went, landed on the side of my head and my shoulder, and tore my rotator cuff, but didn't realize it at the time. So when I got up, I landed on the side of my head. Like I said, I was probably concussed, but didn't realize it. I beat the fuck out of this guy and bloodied him and threw him in the fucking. I tore this kid apart. He was screaming for his mother, and it's. I don't like to get that way, but it's like, man, you do something like that, motherfucker, I'm gonna take you out. So I have a really hot temper. I try to, and that's for other reasons too. I have post-traumatic stress for a lot of other reasons, but that was just one of the catalysts of that sort of precipitated the tour. That was just like, oh man, like a lot of things kind of were rough on that tour. One of the second shows, I'd actually had a rebuilt 9 Inch Nails guitar. That was one of the first things I found in the truck when I was working on. They had like a whole video. It was a broken guitar that Trent had left behind, and I asked him if I could take it home and fix it, and he said sure. So I brought out a fix-it guitar to play on the Lollapalooza tour. And the second warm-up date, I was playing it on stage, and Trent picked it up and smashed it again, and I was like, fuck. So I had to put that in the bay of the bus, and it sat there until I got back home again. And I refixed it, and it's back there again. And so it's just funny how shit happens. So he broke that guitar, and then we get to the first show in Arizona, and it's the first Lollapalooza tour. None of us had ever been on this level. We're playing in front of 40,000 plus large in this amphitheater in Phoenix, and somewhere outside of Phoenix, in the middle of the fucking desert, And we had done it. Everybody got a sound check day the day before. So we met all the bands, saw everybody, and it turns out the Butthole Surfers shared a travel agent with us, 9 Inch Nails crew, and Nine Inch Nails crew shared a tour bus with the Rollins band because there was only 6 of us on the crew, and there were 6 people in the Rollins band, the 5 band members and the tour manager. So we shared a tour bus and travel agent with Butthole Surfers, so we were always at the same hotel with Butthole Surfers and Rollins band, which was ideal because we all felt the same, liked the same kind of music, did the same kind of drugs. It was all fun and games. I'll make a quick point. I was lucky enough to do the second Lollapalooza too, but the difference between the 2 tours, and this is important, is at the first Lollapalooza tour, all the bands stayed at different hotels. There was not one large hotel that just everybody stayed at. The second Lollapalooza tour, everybody B stage, the sky walkway, all the people, all the vendors, we all stayed at this one place. All the bands, all the crew, everybody was at one hotel. First Lollapalooza, not so much. You had Rollins band open, Butthole Surfers were second. Ice-T and Body Count were always at different hotels. Or Ice-T had so many people on his bus, he actually drove it. He fired his bus driver at one point, was driving it himself. And then Nine Inch Nails was they'd be at the Four Seasons and the crew would be at the Red Roof Inn and near the venue. So I'm not knocking it. I mean, bands should be at decent hotels, but that's how it was. We stayed closer to the venue and shared the tour bus. And so anyways, we had our sound check the first day before the first show on Lollapalooza. Everything was fine. A couple really funny moments. Gibby's up there singing, "That's me in my hot rod. That's me in my Chevy, losing my compression." You gotta love Gibby. So, anyways, they did their sound check. Ice-T and Body Count did their sound check. It was great. Nine Inch Nails did their sound check. Everything seemed good. We came back the next day. Everybody starts their set. Rollins plays. Butthole Surfers play. Ice-T and Body Count play. Nine Inch Nails go out to play. Everything's going swimmingly as far as we can tell. We're 2/3 of the way into the song Terrible Lie, and all of a sudden the power goes, pew, and everything crashes. And we're like, what the fuck just happened? And then all of a sudden it goes back up. And so the guitars were dead. The drum rack was dead. We had backing tracks on a cassette, a 4-track cassette recorder that played like keyboards and bass parts because Nine Inch Nails didn't have a bassist originally. And so the drummer played to a click track, and there was extra added vocals and sound effects on this tape thing that was in the drum rack. And a lot of people gave Trent shit for that for years, but it's like lots of people played the tape, and it's whatever. I don't fucking care.
Now it's backing tracks off Ableton. Now everybody does it nowadays.
Exactly. But Trent was giving people their money's worth. He was, and those were still tracks he recorded and played. It's just they were on a backing tape. But that's the scary behind the scenes thing. But regardless, so that went down, and then Trent was like furious. He's like, what the fuck's going on? So we all turned around. This all happened in like a 30-second span. So we turned around. We're like, what the hell happened? And we found out that the total band power strip for the band on stage, what they used rolling risers sequentially, and they flop out some power. You plug into that. Well, the power box they had on stage was bad for whatever reason. It was loose or jiggered or whatever. There was some sort of thing wrong with it. And that was what happened. Is there was a bad power box. So the second song, Sin, starts up. We go into Sin. We're two bars into it, and it goes, dies again. And Trent just loses his shit, trashes the stage, and says, "Fire everyone!" We're like, what? We're like, what the fuck just happened? I mean, it was really like that. We're like, Jesus, So it turns out, like I said, it was a bad quad box, Edison plug, AC power at the back of the stage, and that's what fucked it up. So all this hubbub ensued after that, where Trent was interviewed by USA Today, and he said something to the effect of, we're at the mercy of electrical power and crew incompetence. And even though he meant us, we whatever, I don't take it personally. It was an accident. Shit happens. He has to blame somebody and get it off. And I'm not saying he did that out of spite. He's just, you got to put it off on something that was whatever. But it didn't affect us so much as the rest of the crew who were on the Lollapalooza tour took it to heart, and they were pretty pissed off about it. So there was kind of like a big hubbub about that. And But you know what? We always, and I've tried to stress this to Lollapalooza because I'm doing an interview with a guy about a book about the Lollapalooza tours as well. Nine Inch Nails, we still had the crew. As the crew, we had their back. You know, everybody thinks there was, oh, this bad blood, and no, we stopped caring. But no, that's bullshit. I mean, we had their back. I mean, one thing that did happen is, you know, Rollins is Rollins, and he's opinionated, and he's a good guy. He's incredibly intelligent. And I remember having a conversation, not an argument, with him at the back of the bus. He was pissed off about what Trent had said, and he was pissed off that about the crew statement, and also about the fact that Trent was smashing guitars. It really upset him because Henry's like, what kid wouldn't give you his right nut to have a fucking, you know, $1,500 Gibson guitar? And I was like, well, Henry, you know, that's Trent's prerogative. That's what he wants to do. He likes to smash guitars. He doesn't, you know, it's not, I mean, it's part of the show. You know, I agree with you. I am a guitar collector myself, but, you know, that's what he does. So I, you know, had to stick up for Trent, and I always did. And, you know, we only had maybe two other incidents after that where the power was sketchy. And what we did in return for that is we got a backup power supply, an early computer backup power supply, to back that up, and what's called a juice goose, which is a power regulator, a Furman power regulator, which keeps the power steady at 110. So we got that, and that ended up sort of smoothing things over. We had one more bad show in San Diego, and then we had another in San Francisco. We had a bad show I can't remember. Oh, I remember the reason. It was because Trent was mad about the guitars, because he would smash a guitar every show, and I couldn't find him. He played a certain type of guitar. It had to be like a super distortion kind of pickup, like a Charvel Jackson, a hair metal guitar, because those had the sound, you know, the distortion pickup sound. And the funny thing is about the Lollapalooza tour is it really was like the epitome of getting shit done without the internet. on my days off, I used to sit in a hotel room and I'd call all these guitar places, like, you know, a strip mall, a music shop, or a pawn shop, or anything I could find on it, because a lot of these days off are Sundays, you know, in the middle of bumfuck America. So I'd spend my day off, I'd call someplace, I'd be like, you have, you know, heavy metal guitars like Charvels, Schecters, Jacksons, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, I got 5 of those, because all the metal guys had sold their guitars the years before. And I'm like, how late are you open? Oh, 5. So I'm like, it's, you know, midday by this point. I'm like, I got to go to the airport, rent a car, drive to this place. After getting $2,000 in cash from the tour manager, I can do this. Go get the car, drive to a city, 45 minutes out of every major city in America, grab the 5 guitars, hand the guy $2,000, drive back to the venue, put all the guitars in the rack, oftentimes not even restring them because they're just going to get smashed. And on this particular day in San Francisco, on this particular day, we were at Bill Graham's venue. It was Mountain View, California, the Shoreline Amphitheater. And the song was Ring Finger. So I go out on stage and I start the thing. The only thing I could find for Trent during this time was this, it was a Fender Bullet, which has single coil pickups on it. It was the only guitar I could find. I could not find a metal guitar for him to smash on this particular day. So I go out there and I put the guitar over me, singing the song, you know, playing it. And then he looks at the guitar at one point, he strums it, and then he just picks up, he throws it up in the air, and it comes smashing down, and I go out and I pick it up, and he follows me back to my workstation, and he's like yelling at me, and I'm just kind of, it's like a blur, and I'm like, Trent, I'm sorry, it was the only guitar I could find, and it's all in slow motion, and I look over out of my peripheral vision, I see Bill Graham, you know, the Bill Graham is like looking at me like, you know, and he sees me looking at him, and he's kind of like shrugs his shoulder, like, you're in for deep shit now, kid. And I'm like, yeah, kind of look back over at him, make eye contact. He kind of shrugs his shoulders. I kind of shrug my shoulders, look back at him, look back at Trent, and I'm like, sorry, man, that's all I had, you know. And I felt terrible, and I met with Trent after the show, and I'm like, dude, I'm sorry, you know, I did the best I could, you know, and I'm dealing with limited means here, you know, and I'm like, you know, I'm a musician, you know, if you have a bad show, I have a bad show. I mean, you know, I have that empathy. I'm a player as well, you know, and he understood that, and after that it was fine, you know, we worked things out, and we ended up the show after that, we drove all the way from West Coast to like Midland. We were in fucking Kansas after that, like Sandstone Amphitheater, Kansas. And then Fritz and I came back out and started playing guitar and had like a hole on that particular show. And that just like made the crew, all the band crews and the Lollapalooza crew, they were all flipping out. They were like, "That's amazing! I didn't know you guys did that." And after that, we became rock stars. We're playing with the band, and I mean, I'd done that with other groups before, but it was cool that here we are working, and I'd obviously done it with the Nails before. But it was just really cool to get the respect of our fellow peers, our fellow musicians, fellow artists, that we were playing with them. And then, but the funny thing is, after that, is everybody wanted to play with Nine Inch Nails on Head Like a Hole. People, listeners out there, go to YouTube after this and look up Lollapalooza Live, Head Like a Hole, 1991, Nine Inch Nails, and you'll see my mullet in the back of my head up against the drum riser playing guitar with like 40 other fucking people on stage, including Trent's dad in a bandana at Blossom Music Center playing Head Like a Hole. It's hilarious. But some of the shit about, like, people would come up to me. I'd be at my guitar station, workstation area, and like Ice-T would come up and be like, "Marky Ray, I want to smash a guitar," and I'd be like, "But Ice, man, I only got like one left," I'm like short on guitars. And John Malm, Trent's manager at the time, would come up and be like, "Marky Ray, give Ice-T a guitar right now." I'd be like, "Okay," and I'd get a guitar. He'd like go out on stage and like not even plugged in, and just be like, "Smash," smash the guitar. I'd go out there like the guy cleaning up shit after the elephant, like pick up the neck and the body pieces, put them in a trash can, and at the end of the night. And this was the other thing, getting back to that guy on the Wax Stacks page saying about, "Oh, I saw him use wood glue, super glue to glue the guitar back together." No, buddy, it wasn't super glue. It was horsehide, wood glue, and C-clamps and drywall screws. That's what held the guitars together. We used drywall screws on that earlier tour with Die Warsaw in 1990. We were so skint on buying guitars, we reused the Charvel Jacksons and shit. As a matter of fact, I'm sending Martin Atkins a guitar neck from one of those guitars. It has two drywall screws on either side of the truss rod. You countersink the drywall screws on either side of the neck. And when they come out the back, you break them off and file them down. And we'd slather wood glue in there, C-clamp them, drywall screw them, let them sit overnight. And miraculously enough, and Kevin Lyman and Kevin, who's did the Warped Tour and all that stuff, made that famous. Kevin was the production manager, one of the production managers on the first few Lollapalooza tours. So Kevin Lyman and I would take this garbage can, a real garbage can, filled with all these broken guitars with C-clamps, and put them on the truck at the end of the night. I'd see them in the next city, and I'd take the guitars off, take the C-clamps off, and string them up just enough to get them close enough to tune so Trent could go black and smash, and we'd do that again. So that was just one of the many crazy things that happened on that particular tour, and that's how we got to doing all the crazy guitar shit. So after we did the Lollapalooza tour, and when we went to Orlando with them, we did the Orlando shows, and Trent smashed his Explorers right before we went to Europe to play with Guns N' Roses. So we flew right from Orlando, Florida to Mannheim, Germany to play with Guns N' Roses in front of 100,000 large. And it was absolutely insane. So I've never been to Europe. I've never been to Germany, especially, or, didn't speak a lick of German other than what I knew from Hogan's Heroes growing up. So we managed to wrangle a driver who took me to, I think it was Hanover or Hamburg. I can't remember. It might have been Hamburg. And I managed to get two more guitars. I found a beautiful Gibson copy of an Explorer. It was made by a company called Aztec, and it was just a beautiful copy of an Explorer, which is what Trent had been playing at the time. And I also found a 1976 Firebird with gold hardware, with the really rare version of reverse headstock, signed by Rory Gallagher. And I took that back to the Nails guitar world, and that's what Trent played for. Well, he played the Gibson Explorer for one show. He did the Guns N' Roses show, and I can't even begin to stress how big that show was. So Guns N' Roses were like the biggest band in the world at the time. From the stage to the horizon, there were people, and as far as the eye could see, there was people in every direction in front of the stage. The stage itself was 300 yards wide, probably 100 yards deep.
Jesus.
Delay towers about a half a mile back. I mean, it was insane. And we played in this little teeny spot right in front of all their band gear, but we still had room to play. And we went out to play with them, and it was just fucking bedlam because the Nails record had not been released in Germany at that time, so they didn't know who the fuck we were. So they were just throwing shit left and right. And Trent's like, "Nice shot, fucker!" And there's like Wiener Schnitzel, 11 o'clock. You know, I mean, it was just apples and corn cobs and you know, bottles, glass, every kind of imaginable detritus. And right before we went out, I remember Trent was like, "You're coming out on Head Like a Hole, right?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'll be there. Fuck yeah!" So I played guitar in Head Like a Hole with Guns N' Roses, 9 Inch Nails in front of 100 large there, and then we started our European tour after that. It was like we went to Holland and played Rotterdam, and then we went back over to. Right from there, we went to Wembley and played. With Guns N' Roses there, and that was absolutely the same thing, just absolutely insane. And that day, Trent, I should let me go back to the Germany show. Trent took that beautiful Gibson Explorer, that Aztec copy. After 6 songs, we played 6 songs. He throws the thing up in the air. The neck comes down right in. Guns N' Roses had this aluminum decking, and the neck went right in the headstock. You know, real fragile little point there, and just snapped right off. And it was like. It was like cordwood. I mean, it just sticking up out of there. It's like, I'll never be able to repair this. So it went right back in the box, and I took it home to repair it. And it actually did get repaired. Dan Johnson, who's the guitar tech for the Black Keys, amongst many others. He was a guitar tech for Judas Priest at the time. But Dan builds guitars. He actually managed to fix that, and we have that in the Nails pile of reformed guitars. But so that day when we played at Wembley with Guns N' Roses, equally as large, but it's fucking Wembley Stadium. You know, the WEM. You know, each section of the seating has a letter in it. You know, so you're like, holy crap! I have pictures of it. You know, pre panoramic cameras where I take like a picture, another picture, and then another picture, and I tape them together so you get one big swath of the panoramic view of what it looked like from the stage with the place empty. We were doing sound check there, but that day Trent realized he wasn't going to be able to get off of TVT Records without a real legal fight. And he was pretty upset, and he smashed a brand new Explorer that he played for that one show. He just bought it, brought it in, tuned it up, handed it to him, and he played it and then smashed it and went back in the case, went home, and I repaired that one too. And on those shows, I played that Rory Gallagher signed 76 Firebird. And at the end of the tour, I took it home because I didn't want Trent to smash it. He ended up giving it to me, which is really sweet of him. And I've kept those Nails guitars, but I took them home to fix them in between tours, thinking we were going to go back out on the road. And then I fixed them all, and then they went back out to work on the Downward Spiral, and I had to go on another tour. So they sat in my basement for years. I ended up fixing a number of them and giving all Richard Patrick's guitars that I had, I gave back to him, and he gave me back one signed, which was really nice of him. And Trent, I would give one over a period of time too, and you know, every time I see him, I try to give him something from the past that we worked or made or whatever. So, but yeah, that was just the most insane time. So we went back to Europe after that, like Belgium, and did different parts of Europe. Played in Paris, Lycée Montmartre. Trying to think of. We went all over. We went back to the UK, and went all the way up. Played all the way up in Scotland, and then came all the way back down and finished at the Astoria in London, and then came back from that, and that was the end of that particular Pretty Hate Machine tour at that leg. And then Trent went to New Orleans and then LA, I believe, after that. He went to New Orleans, did the Broken EP somewhere around early 1982. And I went right out with the band Die Warsaw right after that, because they were touring on the big Electric Metal Bass Face tour. I was the production manager, their guitar tech, their bassist on the song Suck It Up, which was an encore, and their go-go grinder dancer. I used to take an angle grinder, and we had two 55-gallon drums on either side of the stage, and we'd dance around shirtless with like Jackie O glasses on, and we'd hit this angle grinder, and it would spray the whole crowd with sparks. It was fucking amazing, man. And some of the shit we did on that tour, so it was just absolutely nuts. So I did that for the better part of 4 months. Oh, I do need to make one point about when you're in Europe with 9 Inch Nails. We played in Rotterdam. When we played in Rotterdam, we played a festival. There was the most insane thing. It was like an abandoned hospital, like museum, and it had antique hospital stuff in it. So like right next to the venue we played at was all this antique hospital equipment like on display like a museum. And you went downstairs and there was this insane little, it was a pig pen with chairs and cots surrounding it, and it was just like in the middle of this giant room, and it was like really strange. But my friend Fritz, my roommate on the tour and our monitor engineer, was like, hey, my friend Dave is playing in this band Nirvana, they're playing upstairs. And I was like, oh shit, I'd like to see them, I've heard of them, you know. But for some reason I got sidetracked and didn't make it up to see them, and I missed their show. And needless to say, about a month later I got back, and then Nevermind blew up, and it was like, oh man, I wish I would have seen that show. Of course I saw them on the first tour, and then I later toured with them with Butthole Surfers. But there was just happenstance, you know, how we were all in the thick of it just as that stuff exploded, because Lollapalooza happened, you know, and then Nevermind comes out, and then Nirvana explodes, and then grunge explodes, and that happens in early '92. And then I went from Die Warsaw, and then Ministry called, and I did the second Lollapalooza tour with Ministry. So that was, you know, in the spring going into the summer of 1992. And on that tour, it was just completely insane, as I told you before. All the bands hung out at the same hotel on that particular tour. So you had 300 of your best friends at your same hotel, could all party together. It got so bad on that tour, they had to advance the liquor because we would dry out every hotel bar that was on the tour. So we would just drink these places dry. It was absolutely insane. But that particular tour, let's see, it was Lush, Jesus and Mary Chain, or no, I'm sorry, Lush, Pearl Jam, Jesus and Mary Chain, Soundgarden, Ice Cube, Ministry, Red Hot Chili Peppers. And that was absolutely insane because in addition, I mean, the first Lollapalooza was amazing. Jane's Addiction were incredible. I mean, they put on a show every night. I used to get really fucking high. I'd go watch Dave Navarro play his lead in 3 days every night, groove out to Eric Avery's bass and Steven's drumming. And 3 days was like our song, you know. I'd wait to get high on the bus and then go stand over near Dave's guitar amp and just like fucking sway in the breeze. But the Chili Peppers in '92, getting back to that tour, had released Blood Sugar Sex Magic, and that was starting to blow up. But John Frusciante had just left, so we didn't know how the tour was going to be. They hired this guy, Eric Marshall, was a very sweet guy, great guitar player, and he was on the tour with them. And Ministry was just a motley crew of about 22 of us, all giant, black-clad, tattooed, pier-spotted, you know, branded punk rocker, crazy industrial guys. And so it was us, and then some of the other bands were just like, who the fuck are you? Ministry? We pretty much carried that show in a lot of respects because we were so pummeling, just devastatingly loud, incredibly. The songs just can't. It was the Psalm 69 album, which is probably their pinnacle. So we were doing like, you know, Just One Fix, and I mean, just really heavy. I mean, we were like the heaviest band anywhere. And to be honest, we really gave the Chili Peppers trouble every night because as good as they were, we were just that much heavier. We kind of left everybody in the dust, and everybody gravitated to us because we were so. Just a cast of characters. We were all like, you know, all had checkered pasts, and but we became really good friends with the girls from Lush, and the whole band. Lush was just amazing. Just sing like angels. And they could outdrink any of us, and these girls would be up singing the next day, hungover as fuck, just singing like angels, you know. And we'd watch them every day. And of course, Pearl Jam was blowing up at that point, so that was a pretty miraculous thing to see because people we'd be in what we call sheds, like an outdoor venue with a pavilion, covered pavilion. In the business it's called a shed, like a Blossom Music Center, your riverfront in Missouri, you know, that kind of stuff. Those are sheds. So we'd be playing these venues with these grass lawns and these covered pavilions. And as soon as Pearl Jam would hit the stage, you'd see a 10,000 person wave from the grass bum rushing the stage to get to see Pearl Jam, and them just like people just losing their shit, bodies flying everywhere. It was like seeing Fear on Saturday Night Live or something. I mean, it was insane. It really was. And of course, Eddie at that point was he would like climb the lighting rig and get out onto the rafters and the band was starting to freak because he was doing this all the time. He was doing Eddie's an amazing climber, but at some point the band had to pull him aside and say, Eddie, please, not just they were never like, oh, you're our moneymaker, you got to, and no, they were seriously worried about him for his own sake, because he was doing these just dangerous things. I mean, I saw him, we played Alpine Valley on that tour. I saw him climb the lighting rig, get onto an I-beam, shimmy out onto an I-beam with both hands like this, go all the way out to the end of the venue, all the way out to the tree lawn, or the lawn, the grass lawn, and he was a good 50 to 75 feet in the air, and there were kids underneath him, and he let go, and they fucking caught him. And it was like, holy shit. And that's when the band was like, Eddie, stop this shit now.
I've seen live shows where he did that from the balcony of the second floor. He just let go and went back. And I was thinking, holy shit, man. I would have been like, fuck, guy falling, and moved out of the way.
Oh, it was crazy. I mean, and he's such a sweetheart. I became such good friends with him. He was just, it's funny, at that particular show, he came backstage and was like, Marky, I don't know, man. I just things are so weird, man. And I like put my arm around him. I'm like, Eddie, you're just a reluctant spokesperson for your generation. You're just going to have to kind of accept it. He's like, I guess you're right, Marky. I guess you're right. I mean, we were all like, drinking and stuff, but it was a real moment. It really happened. But I love him to death. He's just the sweetest guy. And, I'm happy when I see that they're coming to town, or they're doing something. They're all good people, and I'm grateful I can call them friends. But yeah, those were just amazing times on that particular tour. And on that particular tour, because of that Liars tour I'd done, when I was with the Liars in 1988, we played at this club in Seattle, which is where all these grunge bands were from.
Yeah.
This is a quick backstory. Well, it's as quick as I can make it. Anyways, the Liars were up on stage, and we were playing in the Central Tavern in Seattle in 1988. I don't have this, sometime in September 1988. First time in Seattle. We just crossed the border from Vancouver the night before, and we're in Seattle for the day. And we get on stage, and Dave Bass, our drummer, would start the song, and he started in the song called Soapy. And Jeff Conley, the lead singer of the Liars, is a notorious guy. He would always scream at us, and if you didn't play something right, you had to play it exactly as Jeff wrote it. And Dave, he turns around to Dave, and he's like, Dave, you're fucking up the song. And Dave's like, fuck you, Jeff, and Jeff's like, fuck you. And he gets up on the drum riser, tries to grab Dave's sticks out of his hands. And Dave pushes him off the drum riser. He tries to sit back down in his drum throne. His drum throne crumples, and Dave falls off not only his drum throne, but the riser. So he falls off the riser. And I see Jeff at mid-stage, about 5-6 feet from me. And he's laughing and laughing, and all of a sudden time starts to slow. And out of the corner of my eye, I see Dave Bass launch his 15-pound tripodal Gibraltar drum throne at Jeff's head. And it goes through the air, boom, hits Jeff's head. It's like it explodes, and blood goes everywhere. Paf,
Oh,
and
God.
And the crowd goes, ah, to ooh, to like when you unplug a generator, like everyone's like, and sure enough, blood goes everywhere. Jeff's bleeding from a gash in his face. And he goes back to playing the song. I grab a bartender, and I'm like, give me some bar towels. And they, I mean, I'd done enough road surgery. I know a thing or two about stopping blood flow at this point. I'm like, give me bar towels. I sent him over there to bring me some bar towels. I go over and I hand them to Jeff, who just throws them on the ground. And we play for another hour and a half. And then we take him to the hospital, and gets 10 more stitches. Or he gets 10 stitches to sew up his face. Anyways, so it turns out, a bunch of these people, including members of Pearl Jam and Nirvana and other people, over the years, I'd heard people tell stories about the Liars and that show. And it turns out Jeff Ament from Pearl Jam had been at that show. And he was like, I heard you were in the Liars. I saw you at that show. And I was like, yeah, that was me, man. I was the bassist. And he was like, oh my God. And so we started talking, and I talked to Eddie, and I'm like, I'm from Cleveland. I do Stu Bader, and you guys covered Sonic Reducer, and I'd love to sing backup vocals on it. And they go, fuck yeah. So they set up a mic for me, and I go out and sing Sonic Reducer with them, backing Eddie up. And they did that for pretty much the whole tour. And then later in the tour, Eddie and I started singing backups with Chris Cornell on Outshine, and they would also do Cop Killer every day. So we'd all sing backups on Cop Killer. It's crazy. So it was just an amazing tour. I mean, it really was. We made amazing friends for that, and it was just unbelievable. Just I feel so honored and privileged to be part of that, and it's sad that well, now people are starting to write about it. The original footage from the first Lollapalooza got confiscated when Perry Farrell and his girlfriend at the time got busted in a hotel room for whatever reason. They confiscated all the footage. I don't know if they ever got it back. And it's just kind of sad because that first Lollapalooza footage will never probably come back, other than what's already out there from all the people that have posted things or whatever. But the second Lollapalooza tour, there's probably a shit ton of footage of that. But that was really quite a tour. And so I went from that tour. This is late 1980 or 1992. I did Europe with Ministry, came back, started the U.S. with Ministry, left that tour for a variety of reasons, and then ended up in May of 1993. The management from Butthole Surfers called, and they were like, "Hey, we want a guitar tech and a player for Paul for." They're doing the Independent Worm Saloon record. It was about to come out. And the Butthole Surfers had told me as far back as 91. And I should also preface that the Death on a Stick had opened for the Butthole Surfers in 1987 on the Locust Abortion Technician Tour. So I'd become friends with them way back in 1987. When we regrouped in 1991, when I was out with them and we were staying at the same hotels, they told me, Paul said, "Marky, if we ever get money to hire a technician, I'm going to hire you." And he was true to his word. He did. So he hired me to go out on the on their Independent Worm Saloon tour, and that was with the Stone Temple Pilots, and it was a co-headliner, and they opened, and we always closed. But it was us and Firehose and Basshead, and later Flaming Lips, and it was just that also was an amazing tour. But we were playing every kind of cockamamie venue. We played like a trout farm. We played like like VFW halls, a couple of places. We were supposed to play a band shell in Omaha, and it ended up we had to move it to the Civic Center because the band shell was too small. We did play Red Rocks on that show, but we also played like a couple of summer campgrounds. I mean, it was the weirdest tours. It was called they coined it. I don't know if STP or Butthole Surfers. It was called the Barbecue Mitzvah Tour, and it was so misaligned or whatever, but it really didn't fit the name, and nobody ever really used it, but that's what it was technically called. But the Surfers were touring on Independent Worm Saloon, and STP was touring on their first album, Core. And for all the shit that STP got, they were a fucking great band. And I gotta say, I really respect and like those guys a lot. I'm sad what happened to Scott Whelan. He was a very talented guy, but like so many, he was, he had his issues, and it happens to the best of them. So we went out and did that tour with Butthole Surfers, and I was their chief, pretty much their sole technician, which goes back to my punk rock days in the 80s. Whenever a band could afford to hire one guy to do 10 jobs, it was usually me. And I would do those 10 jobs. I didn't get paid for 10 jobs, but I did 10 jobs. They needed me for whatever. So the Surfers hired me to do 10 jobs for them. So, I mean, I was really the sole technician of doing the guitars, doing all the gear. We later hired on some of when we were doing some solo tours later, we ended up hiring our friend Kenny as a drum tech. And we had Danny Flame on the crew as well. Danny was doing the film and the visuals and other stuff. We did have Ricky, our sound man. But I was pretty much the sole technician, but I ended up playing with them. I would play guitar with them on Who Was in My Room Last Night and The Shaw Sleeps in Lee Harvey's Grave. I would play on those two songs live and do all the the prep work or whatever. And that was a lot of fun. And we ended up we did the STP tour, and then we went to we believe it or not, we did some dates with Pearl Jam, and they treated us great. Went and sang on Sonic Reducer again and all that. And then we went out with we went to Japan, and we played with the Boredoms over there. We did a co-headlining tour with the Boredoms, and it was amazing. We were there for like 6 or 7 days, and every night was just the most amazing. Yeah, if you've ever been to Japan, it's just the most incredible place. It's so futuristic. It's like Blade Runner, Legoland, and Speed Racer rolled into one. I mean, it's just the most insane thing. And so we played in Japan and then Hawaii, and then came back, and we ended up going out and around November. We did a short tour with the Mighty Mighty Boss Tones, but that didn't work for whatever reason. Our managements never quite agreed. Stuff. And the Butthole Surfers had been touring at that point for the better part of a year, and they were kind of like, we need a break. So we took a short break, and then we did the last U.S. Nirvana tour. We did December 28th of 1993 through January 9th of 1994. We did the last U.S. swing of Nirvana on the West Coast. So all those posters you ever see, the Kazakhs and Coops and Tad posters, where it says, it says Nirvana, Butthole Surfers, and it'll say Tad on a lot of that. Tad wasn't on that tour. It was Chokebore was the band on that. The posters are misprinted. But we played the Forum. We played the San Diego Civic Center. We played the Medford Proving Ground, whatever the fuck that was, Medford, Oregon, like New Year's Day. We played up in Vancouver. I turned 30 on stage with Butthole Surfers in Vancouver. It's just insane. And when we went to Canada, I was the tour manager. I was a production manager. I did immigration. I did all the work permits, everything. This is back in the old school. You had to do all this stuff. You pay for everybody's permits, all this stuff, all the work permits and everything. You cross the border, get up there, check them in the hotel, go set up all the gear, sound check the gear, play, go do the show, play the show, pack it up, go get paid. So I mean, all the stuff that goes into that I had to do, which gave me great experience for what came later with the Toadies when I had to do it. Was two of us just doing everything with Toadies, and that was a couple of years later. But so we did the last U.S. tour with Nirvana, which was amazing. I mean, the thing about the Butthole Surfers that's so great, and this is why I love them so much, is just they were such an American original band, and they were just so unique and so just great people. I mean, they're Texans, but they're just lovely folks. And they're just so talented, but so humble, and just good people. And everybody wanted to hang with them. I mean, when we go to L.A. and in the dressing room, it's like when we on that Nirvana tour, you go in the dressing room, and I don't mean to just name drop here, but this is really true. It's like everybody's a friend. So like here's Anthony and Flea from the Chili's are there. Mike Watt from the Minutemen's there. Sonic Youth are there. Johnny Depp's there because he's good friends with Gibby. Alex Winter from Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. And Kurt and Courtney come in with Francis Bean, which is a little baby, and we're all hanging out and smoking and shooting the shit and stuff. I mean, it was just the coolest fucking tour. They loved us. We used to eat dinner every night with Pat Smear. He'd take out his pink lighter and light his cigarettes and go outside, hang out. We just had the best time. I mean, they treated us lovely. One thing that's really funny, this is a funny story I like to tell. Here's the difference between Pearl Jam and Nirvana. And I don't mean this in any slight. This is just really truly how dealing with them on a show level and their people on some of their crews, how they dealt with Butthole Surfers. All right, so Gibby used to do what was called the fire symbol. He'd take an inverted China crash. Kids, don't try this at home. Don't try this at home. He would take an inverted China crash symbol. He'd fill it with alcohol, and he'd light it with a big lighter, and then he'd hit it with a drumstick, and it would just explode into this 30 or 40 foot fireball, and go all the way up to the ceiling. All right, so we go earlier in the summer on that Butthole Surfers tour. We did that with Pearl Jam, and my dear friend George Webb, I love him to death. He's the stage manager for Pearl Jam, and he didn't know we were going to do that. So much to his surprise, during our set, we were doing the last song, Shaw Sleeps in Lee Harvey's Grave. We played a short opening set, and I'm playing guitar, and Gibby's doing the fire symbol. George is like, comes out, and he sees Gibby hitting the fire symbol. He's like, oh my God. And he's running over to grab a fire extinguisher, I'm like, George, relax. I got fire extinguishers right here. It's fine. Nothing's going to happen. But he was not hip to the way we were going to do that. So he was naturally shocked to see his stage and, bursting into flames, even though it didn't hurt anything. But so yeah, rightfully so. And George is very diligent that way. Once again, I'm not knocking him. I'm admiring his safety. He was, he should be OSHA certified. I'm sure he is. Anyways, so when we did that with Nirvana, it was like, Gibby does the fire symbol, and they're all like, cool. So there was none of this, it was all like, yeah, I see the difference here, because they just, they just got it. I think it was more in the makeup of their crew was a bit more attuned to, I guess I'm saying, Nirvana was probably more punk rock than Pearl Jam, but I mean no slights to either one of them. And their crews actually truthfully were more punk rock because a lot of them had worked for Sonic Youth and different people from that era and all came up at this. We were all about the same age. A lot of us 80s people all came up at the same time, the 80s, 70s, really, if you think about it that way. But so Butthole Surfers, we finished with Nirvana in January of '94, and at that show, the last show in Seattle at the Key Arena, Jim Rose, my old friend. Now Jim and I met Jim on the second Lollapalooza tour. They were on the B stage, the Jim Rose Circus was, but I used to go over and see him when they play on the B stage, and I became fast friends with those cats because they were always around. Jim and BB, his wife, were constant presence. You know, they were from Seattle. They knew Pearl Jam. They knew Soundgarden. They knew some of the other bands and people and management people. So they were always around. So Jim and I would get high and hang out, shoot the shit. And during that show in Seattle, right after Butthole Surfers finished, Jim came back to our dressing room. He's like, "Hey, Marky Ray, what are you doing in a month's time?" And I'm like, "Well, Jim, I actually wasn't even months. It was 2 weeks time." He's like, I need a tour manager for a Scandinavian tour. And I was like, okay. I didn't have anything else doing, and I'd never been to Scandinavia. I was like, what the fuck? So we figured out a salary, and I took the tour, and I got a ticket at the airport, and flew out to fucking Copenhagen, and hung out there for a few days, and we started a tour of Scandinavia with the last version of the Lollapalooza version of the Circus, because there'd been a number of those coming up at that point, but this was the last tour of that particular version. And Matt the Tube and the Torture King were leaving shortly thereafter. So I was the sound man, I was the tour manager, and production manager for Jim on that tour, and I worked with the Circus hand in hand, and we got on really well. It went real swimmingly until the end. Our bus got broken into, and a bunch of the props got stolen, and some money got stolen, and that was really sad. So the tour ended a little early, and that was just, shit happens. Buses get broken into, especially in Europe, and you lose your shit.
It was real bad in St. Louis. They had for quite a few years, just about every touring band that rolled into St. Louis got their trailer busted into or something. Yep. They ended up catching like 15 people, and they were doing it in a 5-state area, and they found all these houses just filled with all these bands' gear.
Well, I hope the people, at least somebody got something back, because it is sad when that thing happens.
Oh yeah, they advertised it on the news around here. They said if you got your serial numbers, your gear went missing, come down here. Just show some proof it's yours, and you take it home. We just need to reconnect it with everybody. So awesome. That's very unfortunate. I didn't realize a whole bus, man. Yeah, you got some balls to be doing that one.
Yeah. I mean, normally the bus driver sleeps in the bus in Europe, and it was just freezing that night, and I was worried our bus driver was going to get killed. And truth be told, he probably would have been killed had he been asleep in the bus, not from just the exposure of the cold, but those guys probably would have hit him with a lead pipe or something, because that's what they used to break in it was shitty bus doors. I mean, it wasn't like the tour buses we have here. It had like the folding old bus doors.
Not like the school bus doors.
Yeah. And so you locked it from the inside and then climbed out, and that's what Helly, our bus driver, did. And he came back in the morning, and they busted the chain on the door and climbed in and stole a bunch of the stuff.
Jeez.
It was a drag, but that's how it ended. But when we were in Finland, right before the break-in, right before we returned to Copenhagen, we were in Finland, Helsinki, Finland, and Jim came over to my room, and he's like, Marky, I'm getting ready to put together another version of the Circus, and I know you're a frustrated musician and stuff, and it's like, how would you like to be part of the team? Join the Circus. And I was like, thought about it for a minute. I was like, that sounds kind of fun. I could kind of scratch the itch of being a musician, and I could, learn a stunt or two. I could perform with the Circus. What the fuck? I know some martial arts and shit. Why not? So we went home after that tour, reconvened in Seattle about a month later, and I started attempting different stunts with Jim in the basement of this club called Mo up in Seattle. We stayed at the Marvin Garden Hotel, which is in Belltown, and it's crack city up in Seattle. But we stayed there. It's like a flophouse motel with a couch bed that pulled out. But at the time it was awesome. It was all you needed, And we were having the time of our life. So I went down there and I tried the bed of nails. That didn't work so well. And then I tried the bed of swords. And I was like, yeah, this feels pretty good, you know? So I started, Jim smashed a cinder block on my chest while laying on the bed of swords. I'm like, I can do this. So I started doing that. And that became my act in the circus. And the whole time I was playing guitar with the Enigma, the puzzle man,
Yep.
from the circus, and Sword Swallower, et cetera, et cetera. So it really became a lot of fun for me because I was playing so many different styles of music. I mean, we were doing like theater, burlesque, rock and roll, swing, jazz, avant-garde, noise, sound effects. I mean, theatrical music, all sorts of shit, circus music. And it was all improvised. Well, my parts were mostly improvised off the cuff. But Enigma and I had certain things. He wrote most of the music, and I added my parts to it. And it was fine. But we wrote some stuff together. We wrote a theme song together for the circus while I did the MC. I was also the MC for the circus during the show and became the Zen master. And after the bed of swords stunt that I learned how to cut a cinder block on the back, or not a cinder block, I'm sorry, a melon on the back, a cassava melon, a honeydew melon on the back of my neck with a machete. And that was a stunt that the Enigma came up with and proposed to me. He's like, try this. First time I did it, I cut my shoulder blade open. And it's like, oh, okay, yeah, we gotta be a little bit more careful with this. But yeah, we learned how to do the melon stunt and cut melons on the back of my neck, and I'm paying for that now. I have like 4 herniated discs in my neck and degenerative disc disease in my neck and back, so it's not fun. But
I know that I know that one all too well.
But I had a lot of fun, and we did, and right from the get go, it was an amazing time because we went right out on the road. We were booked by John Brannigan at the William Morris Agency, and he's one of the William Morris is like the biggest and best agency in the world. And if we ever had problems like not getting paid or whatever, I just call him John Brannigan and William Morris and go, "Hey man, if you don't pay, John would call people up and be like, hey man, if you don't pay the circus, you don't get the Chili Peppers, STP, blah, 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 and because John booked all these bands, he's like, do not fuck with the circus, and the promoter would hand the phone back to me and go, here's your money, so it's like we had clout, and he booked us on a B level tour, meaning you're playing the smaller venues in the side markets. Your Akrons instead of your Clevelands, your Cantons instead of your Akrons, your Santa Fe's, your Tucson's, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how you cut your teeth. That's how we got the new circus lineup together. Matt the Tube and Torture King had left, so we brought in this fabulous knife thrower from Chicago, knife thrower and juggler. This guy named Mark Faget, Mark the Knife, amazing guy. He used to throw 6-inch steak knives, real steak knives, at Jim's wife, BB. I mean, go around her, like right
God.
with knives all the way around, trace her body, never once hit her.
Oh,
I mean,
God.
amazing stuff. The whole juggling a bowling ball with the chainsaw and all that. And we used to play chainsaw football, and we'd run out the crowd with chainsaws and chase the crowds around. It was absolutely insane. So we did a B tour of the U.S. and Canada. And then we flew to Australia and did a month's worth of dates down under in Australia. And we were like fucking rock stars. I mean, we sold out all these venues, 3,000 seat theaters in Sydney, and went all the way over to Perth. I mean, up and down the Gold Coast, and did television down there, did all sorts of stuff, got great press. And then came back, then we went right from Australia to the Edinburgh Fringe Festival. We flew in 48 hours time. We flew from Australia to Seattle, landed in Seattle, spent the night, got up the next day, flew to Glasgow International Airport, and then drove to Edinburgh, and we stayed in Edinburgh for a month and played the Edinburgh Fringe Festival, which was just incredible. And every night at the festival we were in a circus tent at the top of this Calton Hill, which is an extinct volcano in Glasgow. And if you've ever seen Harry Potter, any Harry Potter, that's what Edinburgh looks like, is a set right out of Harry Potter, only it's real and it's ancient, and the spirits really do emanate from the streets. I mean, it's just Edinburgh, Scotland is the most amazing town that I've ever been in. I loved it, and the locals welcomed us, and it was just, the Scots in general are just the most wonderful, giving people, and it was such a wonderful experience. And when we were there, during about halfway through our stay there, we get this call from John Brannigan. He's like, 9 Inch Nails want you to be the opening act on the Downward Spiral tour. And we're like, fucking A. So we finished our run in Edinburgh and flew right from there to Muncie, Indiana, and joined the Downward Spiral tour in progress. And that was just an amazing full circle, because it came back to Trent. And I was like, hey, man, how you been? He's like, dude, good to see you. So we became fast friends again. And Marilyn Manson opened up for us, Jim Rose Circus. And Jim Rose Circus opened up for 9 Inch Nails on the tour. It was Manson's first tour. And that was pretty enlightening and funny, too, because they were finding their sea legs. This was way before Manson became famous. And they had their issues, and various personnel, whatever, but they were very smitten with us as the Circus. They were kind of like, thought we were all sorts of exotic sort of characters, which we were, truth be told. But after I left the Circus, those guys wouldn't even talk to me. It was like, okay, fine, whatever. It's like, once Manson blew up, I'm like, yeah, have at it. And oddly enough, I've worked for him over the years as a stagehand, seen him in various venues and whatnot. Just like, they're on the upper echelons of whatever, and I don't even bother. I'm like, I stopped caring about that kind of stuff years ago, but I'd say hi if they said hi. I don't bear them any ill will. It's just kind of funny how that all worked out. But and I even offered. I called John, their manager, many years ago, and I was like, I heard Brian or Marilyn was looking for an assistant, and I was like, I was unemployed at the time other than working as a stagehand. I was like, oh fuck, I'll take that gig. And he's like, no, you don't want it. He's like, you'll be making food at 3 a.m. It's too much. He was sort of poo-pooing it. He's like, nah, you've done your time. So it's kind of funny. But whatever, I don't begrudge anybody their success, and it's really hard to survive in this industry. So it's like, kudos to anybody who can make it, and stay at the top. So, I don't begrudge Brian or Marilyn any of those things. And like I said, I haven't seen him in years, and that's the thing about the tours and stuff. When you do see people, it's like you basically pick up where you left off, which is kind of funny. Jim lives in the south of France. I haven't seen Jim since I left the Circus, and after the Downward Spiral tour, I came back home and started trying to play music again. I started a solo career again, tried playing, recorded a record, and then nothing really happened. I did a couple of music festivals as a keynote speaker. With all my experience at that point, I was like, oh, it's hot property. And then about 6 months after I got off the road, Tom, the manager of the Butthole Surfers and Toadies, called me, and he's like, hey, I got this band Toadies, and they're like starting to blow up. And I was like, okay. He's like, I need a tour manager. And I was like, okay. Little did I know it was more than just a tour manager, but I took the gig anyways. I became the tour manager and the everything guy, the technician, the tour, the everything guys, I like to call it. I did all the jobs for him, and but we became fast friends. As a matter of fact, there's a picture of me on my first day on the job with the band, and it looks like we've been together forever. It's just so funny. It's like a perfectly apt picture. And then that's how it ended up. I mean, I'm still really close with the Toadies. I still love them as people. Still miss them. I mean, I see them when they come around, but they're just the greatest. And I toured with them for the better part of 2.5 years on the Rubberneck tour, and that was just insane because we did so many tours, and oh my god, I mean, I started with them. We were doing solo, Toadies, just Toadies dates, and then we ended up going out with that band Bush. And I wish Kurt Cobain had never killed himself. Then there would have never been a Bush, I'd hope. they were just, and I all right, I'll bite my tongue here. I don't have anything nice to say about them because they just really didn't treat us very well. And a lot of that had to do with the crew. It wasn't their band so much as their tour manager was really kind of a schmuck. And I won't say his name or anything, but this guy he'd been a guitar tech like any of us back in the day, and I guess for some metal band, and he just thought he was the, he even said to me at one point, he's like, it's my tour. Like, it's not your tour, asshole. Well, we ended up, the Toadies made a shirt that said, it's my tour, which I thought was really funny. But yeah, that was the kind of shit we were dealing with. And it was very petty, and we were on the same label. And every night I'd have to go into the production office and be like, hey, Gary, whatever the fuck the guy's name was. I was like, hey, dude, I need we were supposed to get 20 guests every night. And you got 10 guests. I'm like, we're in Dallas, Fort Worth. It's like the Toadies' hometown. I'm like, no, here's my guest list. Boom, and then there'd be some protracted battle over a fucking guest list. Because this guy couldn't, he would just waste our time. Needless to say, the tour with Bush was just dismal. The only thing good that came out of that is I reconnected with my friend Ross, who was the sound man of the Boss Tones, and we made up. We'd had words back in the day. He sadly passed from COVID last year. He was a good soul, this guy Russ, and he was the sound man for Hum, and Hum was a great band. Hum was also managed by Ted Gardner, who was James Addiction's manager on both the Lollapalooza tours, and he sadly just passed too. And Ted Gardner was a mensch, man. He was a good dude. We learned a lot from him. I mean, none of us had been on that scale before, and he showed it out. He showed us how it was done, and I'm honored that I got to know him and call him a friend, and that he'd always greet me with a big Australian hug and a smile. He was just a good dude. So that was the only good that kind of came out of that Bush tour. But then the Toadies ended up going out with a few months later. We ended up on it was Brutal Juice, Civ, and Toadies headliner tour. That was a lot of fun, but brutal. And not just Brutal Juice, it was just brutal, period. And then we had some fun later in about 1996. We were out still on Rubberneck, and we did 2 weeks with White Zombie and 2 weeks with the Chili Peppers, and it was just great. They treated us really well. We had a lot of fun. White Zombie especially was just a blast. I mean, we just had a great time, and those were really fun tours. And I'm still friends with a lot of the crews from those bands, and stuff. And of course, I've toured with the Chili Peppers probably 5 times maybe or more. And I've known them since 1984. So when the Toadies went out there again, I'm like, "Hi guys," "Hey Marky," So it's just like, they're family. Everybody's family. So those tours were really enjoyable. They really were. And so I did that up through the end of 1996. And in 1997, I was home again, and I started playing. I started a band with this guy Michael Perkeiser, whose brother was Lux Interior of the Cramps, who I also got to work for back in the day. And around that time, I did one of the last Cramp shows I worked with. The Cramps came back to town, and Michael ran sound, and I did guitars for one of their last shows in Cleveland. And I'm honored to say I'm a former Cramps employee. I'm honored to say I work for the Cramps. But Michael, Lux's brother, is one of I call him brother. He's like one of my dearest friends. And we put together a sort of a surf instrumental slash alternative sort of country band back in the late 90s called 3D, and we made some amazing records. But it was the end of the century. Label consolidation was happening, radio consolidation was happening, and the music we were making just fell on deaf ears. I remember I went to the South by Southwest in 1999 pushing our EP. We put out an EP in 1996, and people were just over it. They were over all music, and they were like, I played this. We had a B3 player in the band, and we wrote a lot of songs that had keyboards and bass, and could have been out of a band recording or something. The band, and people were like, oh, there's already we have the Wallflowers, we don't, that kind of stuff. Radio people and label people, just they were over it, and a lot of them were losing their jobs and shit. So there was no movement that way, and plus, at that time in my life, I was over 30. So to the music business, I'm ancient. I'm over the hill. They don't. So and Michael's 9 years older than me. So they had no interest in us at all. There wasn't this. There's still ageist factions and everything in every job. But in that particular time frame, it was pretty brutal on us. So we ended up breaking up in about 2000. And then my kid was born in the early 2000s, and I stayed home for a period of time. I started touring, doing some solo tours in 2007, but right before that, I got hired at Tri-C. My friend Marco, who had been at the Nails tour manager, we had both stumbled across this guy, Tommy Wiggins, who'd started this community college program called the Recording Arts and Technology Program, or the RAP program, at Cuyahoga Community College in Cleveland. And Marco had been hired as the tour manager. He taught tour management, and he refurbs century homes. So he got called away on a sabbatical to go fix a century home up in New England, And he said, hey, do you want to take my class for a semester? I said, sure. So I taught his class for a semester. And during that time, I wrote my book and wrote all these lectures, which stemmed out of a series of lectures I'd written about my time on the road. And that's what became my book, Rock and Roll Mercenary. So when Marco got back and took over his tour management class, I went to Tommy and said, hey, I have this production management class I'd like to teach, because they're all different things. Tour management, production management, they're different, they're really different things. And a lot of people don't realize that, but there's all these different jobs that go into the industry. So, and I'd done them all. So I was like, I was the right person to write about it. So I did this, we put the class together, and it's still running. That's concert technical production. We're at 1600 at Cuyahoga Community College. And during that time, in the year 2001, I became a union stagehand, and I've been a journeyman stagehand for 12 or 15 years now. I forget how.
Semi-retired, you said.
Yes, I'm semi-retired. I'm retired from doing semis, and that's because of my arthritis. But I'm still a union stagehand, still in good standing. But I did that during the time, and during that time, what would fuel a lot of my lectures and things like that for teaching my class was all the stuff I'd see at Blossom, which is the amphitheater or the shed I work at, Blossom Music Center. It's home of the Cleveland Orchestra, the summer home of the Cleveland Orchestra. And I would go there and see all the tours that come in, whether it was the Jonas Brothers or whatever, the Cure or Tom Petty or White Zombie or whoever was coming in, Pantera, we worked for them. And that was a really cool thing to be able to do, was to see all the bands, and that would help formulate my lectures about production, how people are touring now, the latest technologies, yada yada, video, pinging, pinging photographs from live feeds from the crowd into the television feed backstage to the main, screens. I mean, just the kind of things that were happening over that period of time. And then the foray into the internet. I was on top of. When iTunes came out and iPhones came out, I was like, I type into Google, how do I get my songs on iTunes? And up comes this thing. It says TuneCore. And I'm like, oh, okay. And when TuneCore started, you could upload your songs. It was like 99 cents a song, and start your album for $1, and you could upload an album for, $10. And I was like, and they were MP3s, and you'd sell them, and I'd sell them all over the world. And that was kind of like, wow, this is really cool. And then other things started happening. There was Disc Revolt and some other companies that were making download cards. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, well, this is cool. You make download cards. And I've always been a graphic designer. I've always made my own flyer. Going way, way back, I know I talked about college. I talked about college briefly. But even in college, for all my bands, I always made flyers, paste graphics. Even in high school, I was doing that. So in the late 70s, I was making band flyers or punk flyers. And being an archivist, I have thousands of flyers, not just my own, but I've saved flyers from all over the world where I've been. Whenever I find a band flyer, I save them. So that was another thing, was I got into doing graphics. I got into figuring out how to do things like videos. As all that stuff came along, I just would work on my skill set. And that's helped me get through all these years of teaching, is being able to show the students, this is how you do this is how you do that. And it's pretty cool. I've been very fortunate in that respect. And I continue to work in the industry. Like I said, I'm doing less stagehanding, but I'm still at the Beachland. My class is the stage crew for the world famous Beachland Ballroom. There's been 2, if not 3 songs written about the Beachland. The Idols just had the song called Beachland Ballroom. It's on the charts and all that. And Glenn Tilbrook many years ago wrote a song about the Beachland Ballroom and actually performed it, I think, on Conan. But that's where my class is held. My students are the stage crew there. And that's what some of them were texting about earlier when they get the text rolling in. But that's what I'm continuing to do. And I've reformed my 80s band, Death on a Stick, and we're playing again. And Death on a Stick is an industrial strength jazz band. And, or we like to say avant-garde, a clue, as George Harrison said. We're an an improvisational band, but it's funny because we were really like industrial jazz. We were kind of like Perubu meets like, I don't know, influences like Can, Noi, Kraftwerk, obviously. But everybody in the group has done so many different things. Andrew, our guitarist, it goes back to the 70s punks. He was tied in with a lot of, the underground people in the late 70s, early 80s in the punk scene. Tina, my keyboardist, was one of the original people in, we formed Death on a Stick together back in 85. She does solo work. John, my percussionist, John 1, we have John 1 and John 2. John 1, my oldest percussionist and older Death on a Stick member, he used to roadie for Sun Ra. So it's like, wow, I mean, that alone would get you in a magazine. It's like, dude, he's a roadie for fucking Sun Ra. Used to call him up in the middle of the night and be like, John, what are you doing? Anyways, so, and myself, I just went over my history, and John 2, my other drummer, is just this amazing, incredible drummer slash improvisational player who does all sorts of crazy stuff. And he's the newest addition to the band, but he's a perfect fit. So we're kind of like this punk rock Grateful Dead. I have two drummers, and I'm like having to snake my bass through these insane polyrhythms, and it's wonderful. It's really fun, and I'm really enjoying playing with the stick again. So I'm just hoping that we can do something with that. But more or less, we're probably going to be doing things like licensing our material, getting songs placed. Because really, as we talked about, you and I've talked about, publishing is where it's at.
Yeah.
That's where you make your money, getting songs placed in this day and age. So that's kind of been publishing is kind of where my mind has been at lately in terms of teaching the students and having a back catalog. I'm really fortunate because I've done so much recording. I've played in so many bands. I have so many recordings of these things going back years that I can continue to make videos. I can continue to license material for quite a while. And the future, and I can't stress this enough, I'm really stressing this to my students, is content, like what you're doing here. By having this content someday, you will be able to, hey, I have 100 podcasts of this, I'm going to put it up here and either extract royalties from that, or you can pay me $1 million for this 100 podcasts, and that's really how it is probably going to be for the future gig people, now. And that's what we're trying to do is get our music out, get it licensed or placed somewhere in a movie, a TV commercial, an online ad, and also taking opportunities to find placement, sync rights to certain things. That's how we're trying to make money. And we will probably do some select gigs, but we're all older people. We have no illusions of like, oh, I'm going to tour the world again. I mean, hey, if I could play a music festival in Japan again, I'd be thrilled. But, that takes a lot of work, a lot of time, and a lot of planning, and it may or may not happen. I mean, I'm dying to go back and play in Edinburgh, but, and that may be a little bit more feasible, because I've been there before with Edinburgh Circus. I've seen how the Fringe Festival works. You can set up different deals with different pub and club owners, or even household owners, venue owners. You can stay in one place. You can, supplement your income, break even. Whatever. Go busk on the street. There's different levels and different layers of how they arrange the venues and the gigs and that kind of stuff. So those are all things people have to look into when they're doing these kind of things. I revamped a couple of our pages. I did the ubiquitous, the Facebook band page, because everybody kind of needs that. That's where everybody is. You get the most eyeballs on that. And I've kept my YouTube page, Crazy Man 13. Got to push that. I'm
I've been listening to Death on a Stick on there and all the music on there. I've been listening to all the music every day.
Oh, well, thank you. I really appreciate it. And please push. I'm trying to get up to 1,000 subscribers, people. So please subscribe to Crazy Man 13. Because really, that's how when you get 1,000 subscribers, that's when you start monetizing what you have. Now, for those who are like, oh, you're selling out. Fuck you. I've been trying to sell out for 42 plus years. So,
it's like you're saying it's sell out. Do you know how much just this synthesizer right here costs?
Exactly.
It's not selling out. We're trying to pay off our gear.
Well, it's funny because like when I was in the Terrible Parade it was way back in '83, we had a manager, and we got so much shit from local bands that were not. I mean, they thought of playing in a band was kind of a lark, and we were serious. I mean, Alan's 5 years older than me, and me at the time, I was hungry as fuck. I mean, Alan and I used to get into these petty arguments about like the artwork on the flyer, but we were that passionate about it, And Alan's like still a dear friend of mine. I mean, he's like my real brother. My real brother's 5 years older than me, and Alan is just like that. I mean, he really is my brother. We've been through the war together. To quote David Johansen about Johnny Thunders, we went through the war together. But I mean, it's really true, and it's amazing that when you are serious, you're a lot of people back in the day would give you shit because you're trying to sell out. It's like No, I'm trying to make money from my art. I'd like to get paid, and musicians are always the last one to get paid. That's what's so fucked up. It's like, even as a college professor, I don't make shit teaching. I mean, it's, I'm an adjunct faculty, but it's like the kind of, it's kind of really sad how little they pay teachers in this country, and from all walks, public schools, colleges, everything. It's, educators. I mean, I my class has been, I'm not just bragging and toot my horn. I have real proof that classes work, teaching works, especially at a community college level. I mean, I've gotten hundreds of students jobs with sound companies. With, one of my students is the front of house engineer for Megan Thee Stallion, another's the front of house engineer for Trevor Noah. I've had students out with the Who and Jay-Z and Beyonce and different, all these different tours my students have been on and continue to work in the industry, and I'm incredibly proud of them. And that's their success is my success, it's my program's success. And in that respect, it isn't about money. It's about empowering the next generation of people to get out there and do this kind of business and do it right and do it safely, without injuring themselves or anybody else, and having the knowledge to go out and actually do this kind of stuff, or the balls or the wherewithal to do it. Because it's not easy to get on a plane or get on a tour bus and traipse all over the globe. It's your first tour, whether it's a van, a car, a gig, whatever. I mean, it's it's nerve-wracking if you've never done this, and if you have stage fright or whatever, you're doing everything yourself, or you're a solo player, like guitar toting troubadour. I mean, somebody's got to do it, and you got to just, there's a believability factor that goes into what we do. And it's like, if you believe in yourself and you show that you believe in what you're doing, as ridiculous as Death on a Stick started out as, we were sort of tongue in cheek, but it's like, now we're serious as a heart attack. When I go out to play, man, I mean it, because it's like, I ain't fucking around. I'm pushing 60 here, and I'm the youngest guy in the band, but it's like, I'm the leader, I'm the musical director, I'm the one who's in charge of everything. I got to make sure shit happens. And it's like, I ain't fucking around. I'm to the point, it's like, I got limited time space. I'm on the back nine here, so it's like, I gotta take care of business while I still can. So I'm, when we put on a show, we're damn serious about it. And God damn it, if it isn't fucking great. I mean, I've loved we played a couple times last year, and it was just, it's so freeing to play music again. I mean, live, and I'm going to treat Death on a Stick like, if we do recordings, it's going to be live recordings like jazz, and probably not in the studio, probably be just live recordings.
Most jazz, yeah. For those who don't know, most jazz recordings are never done in a studio, and if they are, it's just that everybody's together. It's not, okay, we're gonna mic you and then do you. It's jazz is a whole different thing compared to a lot of other music. There's tons of improv and feeding back and forth. For those who don't know jazz, you go listen to it. A lot of times, it's just feeding back and forth off each other and progressions.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's how I want to treat it. I'm very much into the now being present when you're doing the recording, warts and all, whether it's, there's a sour note, we feel like there's no wrong notes, so just play what you feel, and it either works or it doesn't. And that's okay. And if you can accept it, hopefully the crowd can accept it. But I'm just willing to, give it all I got when I go out there, and let the songs kind of stand on their own, let the music stand on its own, and people either like it or they don't, and that's fine. Let chips fall where they may. So I mean, that's the kind of stuff I'm doing now. I'm still teaching. I still advise. I advise all the time on bands and people and crews, and Jesus, I mean, if I had a nickel for every time somebody called me about, how do I do this, how do I do that, what about this, what about that, should I book the show, should I book this band? I mean, I still do it. I advise all the time. And I'm also an archivist. I'm at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame Archive and Library, which is separate than the museum, even though I am in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in the museum. As a technician, I'm in there. I have a little Marky Ray Rock and Roll Mercenary. There's a quote in there, and some of my tools are pinned to the board. And one of my old briefcases, there's a picture of, and that's what we used in the 1980s, was like a briefcase, because we were doing van tours. If it didn't fit in a briefcase, it didn't go, because that's all the room you had left in the van was a small metal touring road briefcase with a cheap battery operated tuner, some needle nose pliers, to clip your strings and some
Yep.
other string winder and a bag of picks, and that's about all you had.
And you better forget the string winder, otherwise your hands were gonna be cramped
Yeah, I know,
later
exactly.
on.
Exactly. So
Well, I
that's
played Floyd Roses, so you can imagine my deal. I played Floyd Roses since the late '80s, so you can imagine my fun with tuning and
no, I
string
mean,
changing.
as a guitar tech, Floyd Roses are a nightmare. They are an absolute nightmare. As soon as a string breaks, you're a whole step off. And then you uncank the fucking string lockdowns, restring it. Only you take the ball end and put it in the tuning peg, and then run the string into the saddle, reattach the saddle, and then stretch the shit out of it where you tune it up, lock it down. It's a half step too high. Unlock it, stretch it some more, tune it up to the note, just under the note, lock it down. It's still a half a step too high. Stretch it, take it off, stretch it again, stretch it again. Oh God, man, that's just the word. 20 minutes later, here's your guitar back.
You know what the worst thing is about one of them? When the springs come off the back when you're laying into that bar. I had that and you hear ping, and my bridge is in my hand and the guitar is on the ground, and I was on stage just kind of like, what the fuck just happened?
I know, it's brutal. Yeah, when I first started working with the Nails, they were using Floyd Roses, and it was brutal. Fortunately, most of the bands after that did not. Paul Leary had one Dive Bomber guitar that I used, and he used it on Who Was in My Room. It was a whole step down in D, and that had the Dive Bomber Floyd Rose, but that was tolerable. You could use that, but I wouldn't want to do that too often. And
Yeah.
I doubt I could guitar tech anymore. I don't think I'd be patient enough. I mean, once somebody started barking orders at me, I'd probably like wrap that guitar around their neck. I'd probably just be like, bam, smash it over their head. But yeah, man. I mean, it's crazy life. I'm really fortunate that I've been able to do this stuff. I mean, the archiving stuff is kind of where my head's at now. I've been archiving a lot of Northeast Ohio music history. I've kind of become the de facto person on the punk rock music history stuff because a lot of the old cats from that scene have died. So I've inherited a lot of their materials. I have a lot of very rare manuscripts and things like that came from a lot of those people. And I've done my best to try to secure that stuff, get doubles and prints of that, and digitally donate it to the Rock and Roll Archive so they have it. But I also have my own collection of stuff, and I've just tried to save it for posterity. I'm also in the process of getting tribute records or actual memorial type records and just back catalog things released. A few years ago, there was a punk band, well, many, they were an older punk band that used to open for the Pagans. It was a two-man band called Bernie and the Invisibles. Bernie started out as a solo player and had no other backing band. His band was the Invisibles. He didn't have a backing band; they were just the Invisibles. Many years later, this guy Peter Ball joined, and it was Bernie and his band. Peter, his drummer, was the Invisibles. So they recorded Peter. When Peter passed away a few years ago, I inherited his collection of Bernie and the Invisibles recordings. And Bernie was never Bernie Jolson. He's actually a relative of Al Jolson. Anyways, Bernie Jolson, the singer, for years had wanted to get a record released of the material. So I gathered all the Bernie and the Invisible stuff. That what Peter had given me before he passed away was a best of compilation that he had put together. And I got that to this guy Charles at this record store, and Charles, who had also was aware of this, put it out on his label, on My Mind's Eye Records. He put out Bernie and the Invisibles record, and that came through much work of all of us. I mean, I got to give Charles due credit because he spent a fortune getting that record out. Bernie redid the art for it several times. It wasn't cheap. I think it even got pressed. The master got destroyed. It was a long and hard process, but that album finally came out, which made me really grateful, made Bernie really grateful, because Bernie had waited 40 plus years to get anything out. And he's just the sweetest guy, and I was really happy for him. Now, many years ago, when I was playing in the Kent scene with that band, Johnny Clem and the Walkers, there was a band, and like every town has the one great band in town. And the one great band that was part of our scene was a band called the F Models. And the lead singer, Robert Morningstar, who went by the name Ignition, wrote these great pop punk songs. I mean, this is years before Green Day. It's like picture the Ramones with better songs and catchier lyrics and catchier hooks. And I'm not knocking the Ramones because I love the Ramones. Don't get me wrong. They're They're rock gods as far as I'm concerned, punk rock gods. But the F Models were like, wrote these great songs. This guy Iggy did. And he looked like, you know, a cross between Keith Richards and Ron Wood. Like he tumbled out of the womb with a fucking guitar in his hand. He just had the perfectly coiffed hair, the high cheekbones, looked like a rock star. And he wrote these just great songs. And the band, we'd go see him every night. And it was kind of like our drunken revelry night. You know, every Thursday night they played this club JB's down in Kent. We'd go see him. And about 1983, the band had sort of floundered, and he didn't really know what he wanted to do, and he ended up killing himself. And it was really sad because he left behind this great body of work. And for years and years, I've been trying to get a record out of the F Models, and it's finally coming. It's finally coming to fruition. And there's a label in Cleveland called Jib Machine Records, and they do a lot of back catalog stuff. And John Templeman from that label kindly contacted me. And I said, go to my YouTube page, and, you know, here's some things I have to offer. And he immediately struck on the F Models, and I'm like, right on. You know, I let him pick what he, you know, because a lot of stuff was up for, you know, you could put this out or this out or this out. And he immediately glommed onto the F Models, and I'm like, let's do it. So I've compiled a really great compilation of we found a cassette that had this great rehearsal that they had done, made with just a JVC boombox in the rehearsal, set like right next to the drummer, you know, and it sounds amazing. And so that became the basis for the record. And then we took their two singles, A side, B side, back to back, and then there's some live cuts from JV's Down. And it's a fucking great record, and I'm really excited that it's finally going to come out. It's called In Loving Memory, at least that's the temporary name. I've got to go over all this stuff with the band. That's a tentative name, but I'm working on the graphics and all this stuff now. The album's been mastered. I've got to I've got to send it off to have the band members give their sign off on it, and the family members as well. I had to get permission from Iggy's family to put this record out, and it's been a lot of wrangling and a lot of, you know, tears trying to get things happen over the years, but the family's been really great. And all the supporting cast of people that have, like so many people from the scene, I crowdsourced a number of things from the band and from people on Facebook, and a lot of people sent me flyers and things like that. So we have just a great collection. We're probably going to do like a fanzine with a lot of the flyers because they have just great graphics and shit. So I'm just really excited about that. So that's kind of like one of the many things I do. You know, I'm kind of a polymath about that kind of shit. It's like just I take on as many musical projects as I can, sometimes much to my own detriment, because it's, you know, it's a lifelong task, but at the same time, I feel it's necessary to get this stuff, you know, get history right, you know, get the stuff out there, have people hear it. So anyways, I've yammered on for a couple hours. Want to squeeze anything in edgewise? I'm sorry.
You know what? And don't worry, because he's coming back tomorrow, folks. I will say, I want to discuss how small of a world it actually is in the music industry.
Sure.
I've become friends with Sean. You've been friends with Sean, like you'd said, 40 years.
Yeah.
So Justin Symbol and the God Bombs, who I interviewed a couple weeks ago, had toured with Ministry. So, and then you know Jim Rose. Jim Rose,
Yeah.
about 13, 14 years ago, called me and gave me some of the best career advice I could ever get.
Oh, wow. That's great.
Yeah. He called and he's like, you know what? You don't fit with what I do. My wife said to make you famous. He's like, you'll never fit with what I do. But he goes, I'm going to tell you something. Make some Christmas music with what you do. It'll finance your career the rest of your life. He goes, some people call it selling out, but it's money. Everybody always listen to it. I took his advice, and sure as shit.
Right on. No, Jim is a very, very savvy guy in a lot of respects. He knows his shit. He's a master at a lot of things, especially like hypnotism and manipulation. And I don't mean that necessarily in a negative way, but I mean, because it can be connotated that way. But I mean, we used to do some amazing things on the road. Here's a good one for you. I'll tell a quick story. We'd be out on the road, and I was a tour manager. So Jim and I would propose these things. We had the good cop, bad cop thing going on. So I'd be in trying to do settlement, and, you know, settlement in those days is when you got paid. Mm-hmm. And what you sit down in settlement, and there's show costs. Okay, you have a contract that came from William Morris, and it says, you know, it has a whole cost show show breakdown, and it'll be like, $500 for a barricade, $150 for catering, security was $500, this was this and this, all this stuff, all these costs, and you're going over it. You need to see a receipt for everything. And there'd be something, sometimes I'd be looking over something, and I'd do the silent treatment. I'd just sit there, and the promoter would be like, is there something wrong? And I'd be like, I don't know, just looking over this receipt, it's not really adding up, I don't know. And all of a sudden you hear stumbling down the hall, you hear Jim Rose like boom, 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 banging on the walls, and he'd kick in the door, and he'd go, Zenny, which was my nickname in the circus, for short for Zen Master. He'd go, Zenny, what the hell's taking so goddamn long? I'm like, I don't know, Jim, these numbers aren't heading up, and then the promoter would start to get like, kind of heated, and kind of like, and he'd pull out a wad of $100 bills and start peeling shit off, and here you go, take the money. Jim would be like, kind of run out of the room, but I mean, that was one of the kind of things we used to do, and most of the time it worked, I mean, because back in those days, and I'm not saying all promoters are corrupt, because they're not. A lot of those people got bought up by Live Nation, and they now work under the Live Nation umbrella. I've worked with many promoters over the years who were top-notch people and stuff, but they're admittedly, and they're snakes and liars and horrible people in the music industry, and there are club owners that will rip you off if they have to, or can, if they have, and I mean, we with 9 Inch Nails, we had guns pulled on us, and Marco, our tour manager, had a gun pulled on him doing settlement. We ended up leaving that club, and the club, it was called the Video Bar in Dallas, and they never reopened after that. We had them shut down because the guy ripped us off, and it's like, bad news travels faster, motherfucker. It's like, you find the wrong people, you're going to end up out on the streets, and it's like, but yeah, Jim had some great, he had some great ways of getting money out of people, and the whole thing, the brilliant thing behind the circus, we didn't have a record label. We didn't have anybody pushing us. The only way we made money was from merchandise. So we had T-shirt sales that we would sell at the end of the set. On the 9 Inch Nails tour, it became problematic because we had these one-sided T-shirts. So I came up with the idea of a double-sided T-shirt, though everyone will say, I came up with it. It was, because we'd been in Europe just before that, the Nails tour, they'd made these stickers all over and put them up. It said Jim Rose Circus, Calton Hill, live, freaks, and then it would say, chainsaw football, or different things. There was different stickers all over the city. They plastered all over the place. So I said, Jim, why don't we put the word? Oh, the other was not suitable for children, or like I said, chainsaw football. So I said, Jim, why don't we take one of the sticker ideas? Just put freak across the back with the circus logo. And they did that, and it sold gangbusters, because we had to sell merchandise at the same price as the headliner, 9 Inch Nails. We couldn't undercut their sales. We had to sell a double-sided T-shirt for, I think it was $20 at the time, which was a fortune in 1994. So we ended up selling a lot. So that's savvy thinking. Kids don't want to pay $20 for a single-sided shirt. I mean, they want to have a double-sided shirt. So just simple thinking. Put an easy slogan on there that kids will love, because back in the 90s, everybody's a freak. Freaks and geeks. Freak. I'm a weirdo. I'm alternative. I'm a freak. And it sold
Hot
like
Topic came out, and the whole 9 yards and everything.
Oh yeah. This is years before Hot Topic. That's it. Yeah. Now with me, it's talking trash in vaudeville, New York City. And now that was a storm. Anyways.
So again, like I said, he will be back with us tomorrow. We're going to discuss more, because it comes down to, with you, it's more what haven't you done in the industry compared to what have you done. I think it's much easier to just what haven't you done in this industry.
No problem.
So, but yeah, we're gonna get more in depth and hear some of his great stories tomorrow. If you guys are watching this on YouTube, swing over to twitch.tv/JunkieBass. We stream it live there, and then we send it over to YouTube and up to embed it in the website. Marky Ray, everyone, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
All right, guys, we will see you tomorrow. You guys have a good evening. We'll have the plants back up in a few minutes.
Good night, kids. Remember, the road is straight, but you're not.
There you go. All right.